challenges. And then yesterday, the Transport Department actually cautioning against the planned action, stating that it will be illegal. And we also got to hear from Santaco Eastern Cape late yesterday, stating that they are not partaking in the shutdown today. However, they are acknowledging the challenges surrounding government regulation and support of the industry. In Johannesburg, the City of Johannesburg Mayor Kabelo Kwamanda will deliver the State of the City address, and he's expected to outline plans, programs and priorities of the city to basically improve service delivery. The 5 men accused of killing rapper aka and celebrity chef Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane will be finding out if they will be granted bail today. The state and the defense will be presenting their closing arguments. And in Roodepoort, the 6 suspects accused of the murder of the Kaizer Chiefs soccer player Luke Vleers are returning to the Magistrates Court for a bail application, and this after the state requested time to verify certain information contained in the accused statements at their previous appearance. In Kimberley, 8 Nigerians arrested for allegedly damaging state property and breaking windows at a police station will continue with their bail application. It has also since emerged that 7 of the accused are illegally in the country. And also lastly, the Senzumewa murder trial will resume this morning after it was postponed on Tuesday. This to allow the defense to consult with the accused, and state witness Gideon Gous is expected to answer questions and will be cross-examined pertaining to the cell phone data and records.
There's so much there, isn't there? Thank you very much indeed. And Musa, by the way, if you're seeing that shutdown in the Eastern Cape, won't you let us know about it? I know Santaco, I think, are not involved, but if you will let us know about it in 086 000 2032, I'd appreciate it. And Musa, thank you. We'll be listening on the radio 17 minutes after 6.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, fine, 12 and 29. Johannesburg, fine, 11 and 27. Vereeniging, fine, 9 and 28. Bombela, fine, 15 and 27. Polokwane, fine, 14 and 29. Mahakeng, fine, 12 and 30. Vryburg, fine, 9 and 30. Mangung, fine, 9 and 28. Kimberley, fine, 11 and 30. Uppington, fine, 15 and 30. Cape Town, partly cloudy. Fog patches in the morning, a light northerly wind, 14 and 23. George, partly cloudy in the morning, otherwise fine, a light and variable wind, 13 and 27. Gqeberha, fine, a light northeasterly wind, 10 and 25. East London, fine, a light to moderate northeasterly wind, 13 and 25. eThekwini, cloudy, partly cloudy by the late morning, a light to moderate northeasterly wind, 19 and 26. Richards Bay, partly cloudy, a moderate northeasterly wind, 20 and 26. And Pietermaritzburg, partly cloudy morning, fog patches, 15 and 27.
It's time to commemorate Izinja Game, the ones with greatness beyond limits and boundaries. The incredible class on the field, court, ring, bench, and boardroom. This is the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards, celebrating 30 years of freedom through sporting excellence. Experience the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5 May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 8 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag Izinja Game. Hashtag SASA 17th edition. For the love of the game.
Hello, Your Choice Hotline.
Hi, I need you to help me make a choice.
Well, with Ford, you get to make your own choices. Like on brand new Ford Ranger XL, XLT, or Wildtrak Supercabs from only $7,999 per month with no deposit needed. There's a flexible deal for every Supercab at your nearest Ford dealership today. Your Ford, your choice. TNCs apply.
Any person aggrieved by any political advertisement or political election broadcast that is broadcast by SAFM may lodge a complaint within 5 days from broadcast with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA. To lodge your complaint, please contact ICASA's Compliance Department via telephone number on 012-568-3233. That's 012-568-3233. Or email broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. That's broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. Alternatively, complaintsccc@icasa.org.za. That's complaintsccc@icasa.org.za.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
Just gone 20 minutes after 6. Good morning. In the US, hundreds of people have been arrested on university and college campuses as they've been demanding that their institutions cut ties with Israel and that the Israeli offensive in Gaza be brought to an end. As you know, the US is the most important ally of Israel, supplying it with weapons and ammunition. In Israel itself, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he will send troops on a ground offensive into Rafah no matter what happens at negotiations between his government and Hamas. The US has said Israel must not launch an offensive into Rafah. It's the southernmost part of Gaza. There are about 1.5 million Palestinians who are literally living in the open there because they've been forced to move from their cities. Professor Chris Landsberg is Professor of International Relations at UJ and the Saatchi Chair in International Relations. He joins us now. Professor Landsberg, good morning.
Morning, SG.
Firstly, could the protests that we're seeing in the US change American policy? Presumably, it might cause problems for Joe Biden's re-election and policy in the Democratic Party, but is there any chance that what's happening in the US now is going to change the US policy towards Israel and Gaza?
First of all, Stephen, just to link it to our previous conversation, here is another spectacular intelligence failure. They did not see it coming. There have been early signs since the attacks by Israel on Palestine started that the students were agitated and there was a build-up, and this is becoming a national movement. But to come to your question, it is already starting to change policy. Whether it will reach its goals of forcing the administration to start to ostracize Israel, cut ties with Israel, take a more hardline attitude. I'm not too sure about that. But what I don't rule out, though, is that the pressure that the students, and I speculate and I suggest soon to be joined by other stratas of society, workers, and the like, the impact that they're likely to have on companies, on businesses, on those who have direct interests with Israel. I expect some movement here, and it's classic what happened with U.S. policy towards South Africa in the mid-'80s.
Well, I mean, there's so many similarities. And then, of course, also the Democratic Convention of 1964, where protests, I think it was 68, excuse me. 68, where protests really derailed the Democratic Party's chance of taking the presidency from Richard Nixon.
And you know what's so fascinating about what you're saying, Stephen? This year's convention is also in Chicago. And of course, we know that protest was against America's involvement in Vietnam. Now, even though the Americans only lost about 60,000 troops, still a massive amount, the Vietnamese 550. The Vietnam War is called the first televised war in America. You know, televisions just came out, uncensored coverage of the war, and it just created this outrage amongst the U.S. society. And again, it was students, workers, activists, and those who supported the civil rights movement and others that led the charge against the Vietnam War, which finally led for the withdrawal of American troops from Vietnam. I just want to make one other prediction for you, Stephen. Even if it does not change America's stance, because here's the Secretary of State going to Israel again and punting the idea of a 40-day ceasefire. I suppose they just don't get what the students are demanding: a permanent ceasefire and the end of the genocide. America's future penchant for war, its likeliness to just go to war and solve conflicts to war and cause mayhem and destruction, I think it will have a profound future impact on that.
Netanyahu's comments that he'll go into Gaza almost no matter what happens, that he'll go into Rafah, no matter what happens at the negotiation. So, as I understand it, I mean, you can't really have a negotiation with someone if you're sitting across the table from them and saying, we're going to continue the invasion of Rafah no matter what happens at these negotiations. I mean, doesn't that stop the negotiation from happening?
And why is he saying that, Stephen? You see, that's the key point about your question. He is playing to the right-wing hawks in his cabinet, because they've made it clear to him, you don't do this onslaught, this obliteration, the final obliteration, the final act almost in this war. We walking out, we topple you, and you're out of government. So he's in a corner at home. He is facing domestic pressure, not just from the families of the hostages. President Biden finds himself in a similar situation. He's been conspicuously silent on this matter. I mean, it's unbelievable. He can't bring himself. Why? The Democrats see themselves as the as the law and order, but peaceful law and order party. His party is deeply divided, becoming more divided by the day, only 10 days after passing a law. And finally, on your point, Israel is playing them. I mean, Israel has been playing them for a long time. If there's one power who can stop this war, it's America. But I also want to just say, Stephen, if you allow me, I think other Western powers are now on tenterhooks. They worry. This is going to spill over. We've seen in Sorbonne, the University of Sorbonne in France. We've seen yesterday in Germany how the Workers' Day turned into a pro-Palestinian protest. And I think it is going to spill over into the G7 and other NATO countries in general.
Professor, I really appreciate the time. Thank you. Professor Chris Landsbergs, Professor and Saatchi Chair of African Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Johannesburg. You're with SAFM 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, welcome back. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
Pirates to victory in Cape Town.
Wow, this was a good one for them. They turned up the heat to get Cape Town City, outwitting them 2-0. It was Shekufatso Mabasa who bagged a second-half brace with Relebohile Bafokeng assisting him for both goals. More than anything, the win. This was Pirates' first against Cape Town City in the league away, boosting their chances of hopefully finishing second in the DStv Premiership and qualifying for the CAF Champions League next season. Mabasa also increased his chances of winning the Golden Boot as his brace took him to 13 goals. More action saw Stellenbosch. They reclaimed second place after they cruised to a 3-0 victory over Golden Arrows. All happened at the Dani Craven Stadium. Steve Barker's side had dropped to third in the standings on goal difference after Pirates had a win to go level with them on 46 points. However, the Maroons extending their unbeaten run to 18 matches with a third win on the spin, restoring their 3-point cushion to the Buccaneers, leaving Abafana Bastende down to 11th spot. Elsewhere, Nicholas Fulkrug scored a brilliant first-half winner as Borussia Dortmund beat Paris Saint-Germain 1-0 in the first leg of their Champions League semi-final. Now, rugby news, the junior Springbok captain prop Zachary Porthen says the team intends to make a statement in their opening Under-20 Rugby Championship clash with New Zealand later today. Around 9 a.m. is the kickoff in Australia. As this is the inaugural Junior Rugby Championship, Porthen and his team will be the first group to participate, and they want to leave the mark. The Under-20 Rugby Championship was established by SANZA following the struggles of Southern Hemisphere juniors in last year's Under-20 Rugby World Cup in Cape Town. Now, the competition is aimed at exposing under-20 prospects from South Africa, New Zealand, Australia and Argentina to international rugby. Now, more international rugby as Soviwe Soyuzwapi makes a much-anticipated return to the Blitzbox squad when they take on Spain tomorrow, and that's the Singapore Sevens. This is what Soyuzwapi had to say about his comeback.
Yeah, it almost feels like a debut all over again. It's a great relief for me and a massive privilege just to be back. You just realize how special it is to be out here on the field and just enjoying every moment and taking everything in.
More rugby now. Dwayne Vermeulen will headline the Springbok contingent, accompanying the Webb Ellis Cup on the third stop of the Rugby World Cup Trophy Tour. Vermeulen, who brought an end to his playing career after helping the Boks win back-to-back world titles in France, will join Malcolm Marx, Dion Fourie in taking the coveted trophy to Kimberley in the Northern Cape. Tomorrow, they will take the Gold Cup to the Diamond Pavilion Shopping Centre from 1 p.m, where fans will have the opportunity to snap pictures before they head to the stadium for the top-of-the-table SA Cup clash between the Griquas and the Pumas. That's where we leave it. We'll have more sport. Top of the hour on Sunrise. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You with SFM. The next half hour, we'll talk about Masters officers in courts around the country. It's just gone 6:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, a South African Post Office employee, Bonisa Nimzobe, has attributed the retrenchments at the state-owned enterprise to political interference. Nearly 5,000 post office workers are facing retrenchments. The Labour Federation, SAFTU's General Secretary Zulinzima Vavi, says high unemployment is threatening South Africa's democracy. And state witness Gideon Gous is expected to be cross-examined on cell phone data and records when the Senzo murder trial resumes in the High Court in Pretoria this morning. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, if you're leaving Pretoria, coming out of Tshwane this morning, there's just been a crash at Botha Avenue, so 2 lanes are closed and traffic is backlogging reasonably heavily, pushing back towards the R21 highway airport exit, if you like. So once you get south of Rigel, you can either duck down the R21 or you proceed into some heavy queues down towards that Botha Avenue crash scene. 2 lanes currently closed there. Also, if you're leaving Shoshenguve, a transfer, a truck is overturned this morning. That's going to have an impact as you leave that part of the Shoshenguve area. Crossing to Durban, the Bluff area power outage this morning. Lots of lights down. Old Mission, Bluff Road, Bluff and M7. That's some busy junctions, so it might be a little bit slower than normal getting through there. Certainly will be, I would think. Cape Town, a crash on the N2 inbound. This is about the second or third collision on the N2 this morning in pretty much the same area. This is just before the airport exit, and it's pushing traffic heavily back through to about New Way, Spine Road territory in Khayelitsha. If you're coming in through Khayelitsha, the N2 this morning into Cape Town's under some real pressure up towards that crash scene. And Eastern Cape, multiple routes are being blocked at multiple locations due to a taxi strike. An issue with scholar payments from the Eastern Cape Department seems to be at the Eastern Cape government seems to be at the issue here. It is quite widespread. The real hotspots seem to be around Duta, Mthatha, Butterworth and East London. But if you've got any plans to travel through the Eastern Cape today, you might want to re-evaluate those because multiple routes are being blocked off. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Untao Lenglachela, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Stephen. I'm well, thanks. I hope you're good.
How are the markets looking this morning?
Well, global markets are pretty mixed, with the Dow Jones, the only index closing higher in the U.S. This comes as the Fed ruled out a rate hike after standing pat on interest rates for a 6th straight meeting. Markets in Wall Street also digesting company earnings. We saw Amazon's profits more than tripling due to growth in advertising and cloud computing. Over in Asia, markets mostly in the green, digesting commentary from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Back at home, the JSE has some catching up to do, returning from a public holiday. Markets on Tuesday closed 0.5% in the red, so it'll be interesting to see how we kick off the new month. Now, moving over to currency markets, the rand trading stronger on the back of a weaker dollar at 18.57 from about 18.68.
And then the Fed keeping rates unchanged. I mean, this has a big impact on us and probably means, I don't want to get in trouble with the governor, but probably means that we won't cut rates either.
I doubt. Personally, from the people I've been talking to and economists I've been chatting to, they don't expect any rate cuts in South Africa this year. Now, the Fed, as you said, has kept rates unchanged at a 23-year high. This comes as a struggle to keep a lid on inflation. We've seen those inflation numbers over the past few weeks. Consumer inflation, producer inflation, and PCE all coming in hotter than expected and above economists' expectation. This has spooked many market participants, with some worried that rate cuts could be pushed back, or with as Powell and his team are just worried about keeping a lid on that inflation. His team have ruled out hikes, saying that rates policy is restrictive and that it's unlikely that it would raise rates again in this cycle. Now, despite this, the Fed's tone has remained somewhat hawkish. Officials have said that they need to have enough confidence that inflation is under control before lowering borrowing costs. This has resulted in some economists pushing their rate cut expectations further back, with some even saying that we might only get cuts in the fourth quarter instead of September.
And then US consumer confidence falling to its lowest level since 2022. I mean, they've got very low unemployment, but their cost of living crisis is quite a thing.
Now, on the surface, these seem to be looking good. As you said, strong economy, a resilient labor market. But when you dig deeper, it seems like consumers are concerned about current conditions. The recent consumer morale print for April showing a deterioration for a third straight month as Americans continue to worry about their short-term financial futures with prices and interest rates still elevated. Now, the index fell to 97 in April from 103.1 in March. According to chief economist at the conference board, Dana Peterson, American consumers are less positive about the current labor market situation and more concerned about future business conditions, job availability, and income. Peterson further warned that the downbeat trend in sentiment could persist as rate cuts continue to get pushed back.
Ntaleng Lechela, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Back, of course, in an hour's time. 24 minutes now to 7.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Ras Advocate Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Steve, a refreshing morning and a jump Africa to the listeners.
In Haiti, a new prime minister finally being appointed. He used to be the sports minister, and man, what a big job.
Stephen, that is quite true. Yesterday, the Transitional Council appointed Fritz Belazaye as the new interim Prime Minister of Haiti, taking over from the Finance Minister who was interim also, Michael Patrick Buisfet. Remember, Stephen, there have been challenges in Haiti, as we have been talking about, the lack of governance, the lack of security plan also to deal with these gangsters that have already attacked Haiti, including occupation of the international airport. So yesterday, it was the confirmation of the new Prime Minister of Haiti, where they will now starting to work on the cabinet and start to bring calm in the island of Haiti, Port-au-Prince.
And then in the Central African Republic, their capital, Bangui, a UN court there issuing an international arrest warrant for their exiled former president.
The exiled president is in Guinea-Bissau, Stephen. This warrant covers the crimes from 2009 to 2013 by the Presidential Guard. That came from the special court. This is a tribunal court in Central African Republic that is also looking after the former president. So the current president, Umaru Sissoco Embalo, also, Stephen, said that he has never received any request from Bangui about this warrant of arrest. It means that their laws doesn't allow extradition. So we might be having this international arrest warrant for the former president, but the current sitting president might not support it because they want to go on a national dialogue. But this is a UN special court. The same like what happened in Rwanda.
And then in Kenya, the floods and landslides having a huge impact.
Given the huge impact starting Monday, even yesterday, in the central Kenya town of Mai Mahiu, where they have lost 48 people with the floods. Now, the government of Kenya, working with the Kenyan Red Cross, are trying to rescue many people, Stephen, that are being affected. So far, the numbers are 181 people who have lost their lives in Kenya. President Ruto has been visiting some of the sites recently.
And then in Rwanda, their opposition leader, she's filing a case at the East African Court of Justice. She wants the re-establishment of his civic rights. What happened?
Stephen, Victoria Ingabare Umuhusa, since last year, Stephen has been trying to be part of the political or election process in Rwanda. Some of his members have been killed, others are missing, 9 are in prison. This is a woman who is in exile now, Stephen, but he's been trying to have his civic rights being protected. Now he moved to the East Africa Court in Arusha in Tanzania because the current court in Rwanda, they really actually even prevented her to have her civic rights for these elections that are coming in July in Rwanda. We know what you have been saying about Rwanda is democracy from Paul Kagame, but you still have that lack of political activity that comes from people like Victoria, who has been contesting to be involved in the in the electoral process of Rwanda.
And then in our archives, the 2nd of May, 1990.
Very important archive today, Stephen, as we are looking at our 30 years of our democracy, freedom. But this is what I call the source, the genesis of the talks, the Grootes talks that began between the then apartheid South African government and the African National Congress. It was today, the 3rd, the 4th, in 1997, where there was this engagement that also led to the CODESA 1 or the multi-party talks between 1991 and 1992. So the genesis, the source of the political talks started on this day 34 years ago. Asante sana AG, SAFM still leading the conversation, observing the Africa Month.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you. Back tomorrow, more news from our continent through the day here on SAFM, 20 minutes to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, thoughts this morning. Issues around the Masters Court, the Masters offices in the courts around the country. People tell me, very scary stories about how they can't get the money from deceased estates, when people pass away, how difficult that is. There are issues coming up as well. And of course, a lot of going on around the elections, around what will happen in the elections. They're campaigning yesterday on the public holiday of Workers' Day. And I think they're also around, some memories of, what happened 30 years ago and how things were moving, and from 1990 onwards, in a way. The number 086 000 2032. Errol on the line from Durban. Hello, Errol.
Oh, can you hear me, Stephen?
Yes, we can, Errol.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, the Western countries did more to end apartheid than countries like Cuba and Russia. I'll tell you why. Cuba and Russia, at the time, South Africa had one of the strongest armies in Africa. We had already defeated the Cubans they were fighting with SWAP. We had pushed them back.
You're talking about, I don't know about the Errol. You're talking about Quito Carnival.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Look, whenever there's been a conversation about Quito Carnival, Errol, I've found that both sides claim victory, and it goes on and on and on. And I understand why, because it matters so much to them. But I'll be very careful to say that it was a victory for the Apartheid Defence Force at the time.
Well, let me tell you something, Stephen. The West did more, in my estimation, because applying sanctions, and especially sports sanctions. South Africa liked their sport. To be isolated in sport, I was really young at the time, in the 70s. And we had one of the strongest cricket sides, the rugby side, and we couldn't play anybody. Yeah. And overseas investors pulled out, and South Africa was almost bankrupt. That did a hell of a lot to...
Well, I think a lot of people would say that it would have helped if the West had imposed those sanctions earlier, because, they were big. You're not wrong, but I think it would have helped. So, Errol in Durban, thank you. But I think it would have helped if, I think the argument would go that those sanctions could have been imposed earlier. There were big debates in Britain and the United States about it. Voice notes coming through this morning. Of course, Workers' Day yesterday, 0614104107.
Hi, Steve. It's Chris in Camperdown. One of the serious problems that we are facing is that we have a growing population of working poor, people who really live on wage to wage. They can't save, they're highly indebted, and it seems like nobody has a plan about it. That's what has grown the population of Omashonisa, and a lot of our people not being able to secure secured loans in banks. That's a very serious problem. It really needs to have a discussion on the financial sector. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's the financial sector, but there are bigger conversations we need to have about all of it, really. 086 000 2032, 17 minutes to 7.
Nna le bitso la ka ke bonolo moagi di bantse ba re Miss B morara Miss T moahlodi the Bonnie B Bonbon, and we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed, but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
So, a lady from Air Officini just turned 55, and although I'm still a spring chicken, there's a part of me that envies her, especially since she now qualifies for a Nedbank Electronic Optimum Plus account with capital guaranteed. Talk about FOMI, huh, voice man?
If you mean FOMO, then definitely boss man. And she can earn up to 12.85% interest. Anyone over 55 can open theirs via the Nedbank Money app in less than 2 minutes. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
VfB Stuttgart loves it when their fans are happy and they want to impress them against the giants of German football. Meanwhile, Bayern München are still not impressed. They lost in their title race. They want to triumph in this battle. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfB Stuttgart versus Bayern München this Saturday, 4 May at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
Just going to 7:15. Good morning. Well, earlier this week it emerged the Department of Justice had suspended a group of people who are running the Masters offices connected to the high courts around the country. So the Masters offices, they deal with the administration of courts, deceased estates and things that happen around courts, the decisions made by judges. 13 people, those senior managers and other officials, they've been suspended. As I understand it, the Special Investigating Unit's actually been looking at the Masters offices for the last 4 years or so. Dr. Ray Brink is an attorney and a member of the Black Conveyancers Association. Dr. Brink, good morning.
Morning, Stephen.
What do you believe has been going on in the Masters offices? What kind of problems have there been?
So there have been several problems, Stephen. So this has been coming on for at least the past 5, 6, maybe 7 years. There's been progressively deterioration in productivity, and this is linked to an array of issues. Some of which are apparently that there are some ghost workers, i.e. people on the payroll that don't actually work at the Master's office, and then just sheer corruption even at the level of the official in the office. So, for example, I am aware that some people have been paying bribes to some officials, and that means that their work gets done. And of course, that means they get pushed to the front of the queue, and everybody else just doesn't get their work done. So this is particularly important, especially with regard to conveyancing, that's the transfer of properties, because in an estate, typically if there's a property in the estate, that would mean that the delays cause a deterioration and a lowering of the amount that ultimately gets paid to heirs. So, for example, the master right at the beginning of the process must give the letter of authority, in other words, say, you are the executor and you're entitled to deal with this estate, and then at some point, if there's a property in the estate, the master must also give permission for that property either to be sold or transferred. And where there are delays with that, that means ultimately there are more holding costs. So if there's a bond on the property, more bond payments must be made, rates, taxes need to be paid, levies need to be paid, and all of that erodes the value in the estate. And so ultimately the loved ones of the deceased, the heirs, literally, get less out of the estate than was intended. So something has to be done, and we welcome this move because ultimately this process needs to be more efficient in the interest of all South Africans that estates, but in particular, are dealt with efficiently. And the delays have just gotten quite ridiculous. I have one matter, for example, where it is a trust, which is a beneficial trust. It raises funds to give bursaries. It must register as an MPO, and in order to do that, it must amend its deed of trust to comply with certain SARS requirements. I've been waiting for, it's almost 1.5 years for a simple letter from the master saying, we have amendments, it has been applied.
Sure. Is there any suspicion that people are actually able to steal from estates, or is the corruption confined to only basically demanding cash to do the work that they're being paid to do anyway?
Yeah, no. The master doesn't deal actually with the cash in the estates, so I don't think that is a fear at this stage. It is the fact that the oversight of the estate is delayed unless it appears, is the allegation. That monies are paid.
Is there?
Does that access to the value in the estate?
Okay. Is there a sort of connected sort of syndicate of people, or is it a sort of, I know it can be hard to assess at this stage, or are different things happening in different offices? What I'm trying to get to is someone sort of organized this, or is it more of a kind of localized corruption?
I think it's both. Let me put it this way. I have come across people who actually blatantly put themselves out as facilitators. Come to me, and I don't work for the master, but I have connections And if you pay me a fee, I will sort it out. I've even seen people who have letterheads and companies in one case. I've seen it, literally.
It's taken a long time to act. These complaints have been happening for a very long time. Should the Justice Department have acted sooner, especially if the SAU's been investigating for 4 years?
Yes, of course. Earlier action is always going to be better than late action. But, some action is better than none. And so in as much as it is frustrating that it's taken so long for something to happen, we are glad that ultimately something will be happening, because we do believe if there is a threat of consequences, that this will dissipate very quickly. I think it's become such a big issue because people have been able to get away with it for a very long time with impunity. If there's even the possibility that people will be taken to task, I think this corruption will dry up almost instantaneously.
I'm glad to hear that. Is part of the problem, are the records digitized? And if they aren't digitized, documents can go missing. You can end up, just refusing to go and look for documents. If things are digitized, the whole thing is easier. Are the master's office's sort of arrangements digitized at the moment?
They are mostly not. Certain documents are, I know letters of authority are, but in general they're not. In general they're held in physical files, and that is the problem. In the matter I spoke about previously, my file had apparently been lost. It had then been found, it had been lost again, and then found and lost again. So literally we are talking about mostly physical documentation, and that means that someone actually has to get up from their desk, go to a room, find the file and retrieve it and look into it. And yes, that is one of the major issues. If it were digitized, I think it would be more efficient.
It's also about systems. If you have a good system, it doesn't matter whether it's digital or not. It's not hard to run a good system, to alphabetize it. Librarians have been managing thousands of documents for hundreds of years.
Absolutely. But if somebody is paying somebody to do their work and somebody else is not, then the problem is that the so-called paid work gets ahead of the queue. And so the people who are refusing to pay, people who are refusing to be corrupt, their work does not happen. And of course, that's a problem when you're an attorney, because your clients will tell you, but those people over there are getting their things. Why aren't you getting it? And then, of course, it looks like you ain't.
Dr. Ray Brunk, thank you. Attorney, member of the Black Conveyancers Association. Have you come across this problem in the Master's Office? 086 000 2032, 9 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good news, the crash on the M1 South coming out of Pretoria down towards Joburg and Boerta Avenue is basically out of the way, so that really big backlog that was formed up from the R21 has made its way through. Motorists leaving Clayville en route towards Midrand on the Olifantsfontein, big stationary truck at the old Olifantsfontein junction, so Clayville through to Midrand on the 562, really backing up. The Mike 1 highways open after yesterday's drama closing the road due to a fire in Braamfontein. There is a lane closure, I believe, on the southbound side. The investigation is not quite complete yet, but northbound traffic's quite heavily back from Boyson's up through that area towards Smith Street, so it is a different traffic pattern this morning, albeit staying heavy. Durban, the Richmond Road out of Marion Hill, a get-along convoy going slow towards Pinetown. The queue there up as far as the N3 highway junction. Cape Town, very heavy on the N2 this morning coming in from Khayelitsha. It's a crash near the airport exit. All lanes are open, but it's a really big backlog from as far as Spine Road at Khayelitsha. So if you're coming in from Somerset West, Macassar, you're coming out of Khayelitsha to join the N2, it's a very heavy queue right through to that crash at the airport. Then you stay in traffic basically all the way through to about sort of Mowbray Main. So it's a really busy one. The N1 inbound Cliff Hills through to Kubo, get a change, already looking busy. And multiple routes, more and more of them coming into us being closed and shut down across the Eastern Cape area due to a taxi strike today. It's pretty widespread. It is right across the province. Some of the key routes that have blocked the N2 just north of Dutwa towards Mthatha, 61 outside Coffin Vaba, the N6 up by McLean area also being blocked off as well. But it is widespread. It's not the day for a trip through the Eastern Cape, because you'll find yourself stuck possibly in long queues and no movement, or having to take a long way round to avoid it. So maybe if you've got any plans to travel through the Eastern Cape today, good idea to postpone that until the situation is sorted out. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Come test drive the new Ford Territory, the family SUV with a spacious interior, 5 partial leather seats for your family, and a 12.3-inch touchscreen. Get yours at launch prices from only 590,000 Rand, including an optional service plan for a limited time only. Get to your nearest Ford dealer and test drive the new Ford Territory today. T&Cs apply.
It's time to commemorate Izinja Game, the ones with greatness beyond limits and boundaries. The incredible class on the field, court, ring, bench, and boardroom. This is the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards, celebrating 30 years of freedom through sporting excellence. Experience the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5 May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 8 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag Izinja Game. Hashtag SASA 17th edition. For the love of the game.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
5 minutes now to 7. Good morning. The Gauteng Community Safety MEC, Faith Maziboko, says people in the province who rent out their rooms or properties to undocumented migrants will be arrested when police conduct raids on them. And under the Immigration Act, as I understand it, it's illegal to provide accommodation to any person in the country who is here illegally or to provide any immovable property to that person. Lebogang Lukeles, the spokesperson for the Gauteng Department of Community Safety. Lebogang, good morning.
Good morning and good morning to the listeners.
What promises the MEC making here? What is she saying will happen?
We are just going to enforce the law. You must remember that we are dealing with legal and illegal foreigners in the country. Let me just explain what is a legal foreigner. A person in possession of either a valid visa that entitles them to study or work or do business in South Africa for a certain period of time. Then we can give accommodation to those people.
Okay. The Immigration Act has been on the books for years, and I presume this clause that says it's illegal to provide accommodation to someone who's here illegally has been on the books for years. Has it been enforced up until now? I mean, if it hasn't been enforced up until now, obviously it would be right that it's enforced now, but what comfort can you give us that it really will be, is my question.
Okay, what we're going to do now for safety of South Africans, for safety of all of us in South Africa, we're going to work with the Department of Home Affairs when we do our stop and searches or when we're doing our imbizos. What is going to happen is that when we go to a home and we find that you are harboring illegal foreigners without checking documents, you must take accountability. You must remember that legally, landlords are permitted to use their properties for foreigners, provided the foreigners in the country are legally. And Immigrants Act states that letting an illegal foreigner is classified as aiding and abetting an illegal foreigner, and this is a criminal offense. So we're going to enforce that criminal offense.
But Lebogang, my point is, why are you doing this now? It's been a law for years. Why, on the 2nd of May, on the 1st of May 2024, suddenly the provincial government is going to do this if it didn't do it before?
We've been doing it before, but now we're going to enforce it. You must remember, I don't know whether it's 2 months or 3 months ago, there was a child who was killed by a foreigner who was renting in that property. When we investigated, we find that the landlord didn't even have documents for this foreigner. So we're trying to enforce that the landlords, they must make sure that they check documentation, even if it means they do security check. We just want to deal with illegal people. Okay. Legal people don't have a problem with them.
Sure. When we talk about landlords, now you may be looking at landlords who rent out a large number of properties. But as you know, many people rent out their back room, or they'll build a room or whatever. They'll let someone, stay in the back. And I don't know if those are formal agreements. These are often, people who maybe know each other a little bit, maybe met each other at work or something. I don't know if people would really know where people come from. And also, it would be very easy to be an immigrant and to say to a landlord or the person who you're renting a room from, I had documents, but the police officers stole my documents, or I can't find them. I mean, you can't expect someone who's renting out a room to go and find out if that's true. What I'm trying to get to is, I'm not arguing about the law. The law's the law. What I'm trying to say is that this might be quite difficult to actually enforce.
We are just urging the landlords that they must enforce it. If they do it themselves, it's going to be easy for us to do our job.
Okay, but why has this not been done for the last 10 years on a large scale? I mean, you talk about one case. I'm not aware of this being implemented on a large scale before.
I guess this one case was an example that actually this is not enforced. So we have to enforce it to avoid things that has been happening in our country.
Lebogang Lokele, thank you, spokesperson for the Gauteng Department of Community Safety. Well, in a moment, we'll talk more about black economic empowerment and the property practitioners industry. I think we call that estate agents, don't we? Do property practitioners, estate agents? I think that's the same thing. There seems to be a new requirement coming through, and then also there's some intriguing developments in the Freedom Front Plus. Leonard Max has resigned. He says that the party has exhibited racism. We'll find out more about that. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's Thursday morning. Good morning at 7 o'clock.
In our top stories, Post Office employee blames political interference for retrenchments, and Eastern Cape government warns against transport shutdown. Good morning. A South African Post Office employee, Bonisani Mzobe, has attributed the retrenchments at the state-owned enterprise to political interference. Nearly 5,000 post office workers are facing retrenchments. This after the Joint Business Rescue Practitioners, the BRPs, announced in a statement on Tuesday that the temporary employee-employer relief scheme TERS application was unsuccessful. The Joint BRPs Anush Raplul said the earlier withdrawal of the termination letters was conditional on the success of the TERS application. Mzobe says workers were hopeful that the previous executives would turn around the situation.
Workers had strong belief that Mr. Banks is changing the outlook of post office. We started to see some improvement. Unfortunately, the political space that is always interfering with the post office. We have lost a very good CEOs in post office. Going back to Mr. Mambeula, he was one of the best CEOs that post office has ever hired. But what happened? Political space came in and then they removed him.
The Labour Federation SAFTU's General Secretary Zulinzima Vavi says high unemployment is threatening South Africa's democracy. He has attributed the country's high levels of poverty and inequality to what he calls government systemic failures. Vavi was addressing the Shop Stewards Council of Unions affiliated to SAFTU in the Eastern Cape as part of Workers' Day celebrations yesterday.
Can't have 42% of people unemployed. 4 or more than 4 out of every 10. That's a recipe for an implosion. You can't have 8.7 million or 59-60% of your young people unemployed. And you can't have that crisis afflicting more black people who were promised a better life for all in 1994.
State witness Gideon Gous is expected to be cross-examined on cell phone data and records when the Senzumehiwa murder trial resumes in the High Court in Pretoria this morning. The trial was postponed on Tuesday to allow the defence to consult with the accused. 5 men are on trial for the gunning down of the Bafana Bafana captain at singer Kili Khumalo's parental home in Vosloorus, east of Johannesburg. In October 2014, the state had earlier confirmed that all outstanding documents were handed to the defence. The Eastern Cape Transport Department says collar transport operators' planned total shutdown of the province today will be illegal. It says the operators' action is over the department's non-payment of the dues. The department spokesperson Unati Bingoshe says the non-payment is due to technical glitches and some of the operators' refusal to sign contracts. Bingoshe says the next 5 million rand payment will be made available tomorrow.
Eastern Cape Provincial Government as well as the Department of Transport, according to those who are advocating for a complete shutdown, to rather revisit their decision. as the impact of that will be overreaching, affecting the elderly and the frail will be out to collect their social grants, not to mention their fellow taxi operators who are dependent on the taxi rank, on the daily commute of people to make ends meet. The province will, however, ensure that there are boots on the ground for any eventuality.
Further afield, and finally, senators in the U.S. state of Arizona have voted to repeal a 19th century law banning abortion unless the mother's life is in danger. The bill was revised after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right of women to termination. The BBC's David Willis reports.
In a ruling that proved highly controversial, the Arizona Supreme Court determined that a law dating from 1864 banning abortion from the moment of conception could be enforced across the state. Amid the outcry that followed, Democrats then set about attempting to repeal the legislation passed before Arizona was granted statehood, which they have managed to do with the help of Republicans, whose members are bitterly divided over the issue.
Recapping the top story, a South African post office employee, Bonisani Mzobe, has attributed the retrenchments at the state-owned enterprise to political interference. Nearly 5,000 post office workers are facing retrenchments. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports Headlines, soccer action. Kaizer Chiefs, they are set to challenge Mamelodi Sundowns' title run tonight at FNB Stadium, while the Junior Boks, they gear up for their opening under-20 rugby match against New Zealand this morning. Catch the details just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Top story from the traffic desk this morning. Multiple routes being blocked across the Eastern Cape. It's a taxi strike and a taxi blockade, effectively, of multiple routes in multiple locations. Make sure you've got plenty of time to get where you're going this morning. You could very easily find yourself just coming into a blockage and no way through. And you could be sitting there for some time, or you might have to divert the sort of longer way round. Just an update as well. Parents with school-going children should really check with the school just in advance. A lot of schools across the Eastern Cape have sent out notices closing them down for today. Mid-Rand section, heading that way from Clayville, a broken down truck on the Olifantsfontein at the old Olifantsfontein Road junction. So that is quite a heavy queue. And driving into Cape Town this morning, an earlier crash near the airport and a breakdown at Hospital Bend. It's a very heavy Thursday run-in on the N2. You're queuing from Spine Road at Khayelitsha, no gaps, all the way through to Hospital Bend. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 after 7, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Glad you're with us this morning. Well, plenty to come. We'll talk about black economic empowerment in the estate agency sector. The property practitioners sector is the official title. There have been new requirements there. Not everyone seems to be happy about it. We'll talk also about the Freedom Front Plus, and we'll speak to them. Leonard Max has resigned. He claims that people in the party used sort of racist language around him and to refer to him. So it's an interesting conversation coming up there. Your mediated conversation in a little while, and when we had this conversation on Monday morning, I thought there might be something bigger here when the police ministry says they'll act against people who have incited violence on social media during the elections. The point, of course, is that this hasn't happened in the past, so how can we know it's going to happen now? And that's just part of the problem. You know, when someone on social media says XYZ, you don't always know who's saying XYZ. Actually quite difficult, and people do this in a very organized way. You know, all the problems with bots. So we'll have a conversation around that. I think it could be quite important. So all of that to come. Also, if you're in the Eastern Cape, and I know Santaco have distanced themselves, the National Taxi Councils, the South African National Taxi Council at Santaco have distanced themselves from this shutdown, as I understand it. Seems to be about sort of transport to schools, the people who do that job. But if you are coming across that problem, will you let us know, please, what's happening on 086 000 2032. Also, situations in the Master's office. 8 minutes after 7.
Support Slipper Day on the 31st of May and help children like me fighting life-threatening illnesses to reach their dreams. Visit reachfordream.org.za and make a difference. And don't forget to step into your slippers on Slipper Day. Reach for a Dream, inspiring hope. This is an SABC-supported initiative.
more. So sell your car for the best price and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
VfB Stuttgart loves it when their fans are happy and they want to impress them against the giants of German football. Meanwhile, Bayern München are still not impressed. They lost in their title race. They want to triumph in this battle. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfB Stuttgart versus Bayern München this Saturday, 4 May at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
10 after 7, good morning. The Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority has told estate agents they will not be allowed to continue trading unless they fully comply with Black Economic Empowerment regulations. It says estate agents will have to have what's described as 40 points on the system. That amounts to BEE level 8. And as I understand it, this is the first time the authority has actually said specifically that all estate agents have to comply with this. Pete Leroux is the CEO of the business organisation Saka Lige. Pete, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
How do you respond to this? Do you believe that the authority has the right or the power to impose this regulation?
No, the PPRA is acting completely unlawfully. It has no power under the Act to make BEE participation compulsory. Remember, this amounts basically to licensing participation in the economy itself. Now, the PPRA is relying on the Act, and it says, well, the Act says we can ask for valid certificates. That's true, but a valid certificate can also just certify that you're not participating in BEE. What the Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority is now doing is, out of its own, deciding what minimum compliance looks like. And this is a completely unacceptable situation and completely unlawful.
Which Act are you referring to, the BEE Act or the Act around property regulation?
The BEE Act has creates no obligations for property practitioners. Only the Property Practitioners Act does. That came into effect 2 years ago. And under the Act, part of the administrative things that you have to do when you apply for a Fidelity Fund certificate is you have to give a BEE certificate. It doesn't say that has to indicate what level of compliance. It just says you have to have a certificate. That is questionable enough, but what the PPRA is doing now is taking that Act and pretending that has some relevance to the BEE Act with regard to some level of minimum compliance, which it completely does not.
How difficult would it be for companies to comply? It is the lowest level of BEE. It can't be that difficult.
Well, there are two questions here. The one is about difficulty and the other is about principle. I think let's handle the principle one first. Can we have a political entry requirement for participation in the economy? Can we say that it's allowable for a state to say that unless you're of a certain race or you participate in a certain political program, you will not be allowed to start a business? Or it's basically saying you're not allowed to put food on your table or add to the economy and to society around you. That principle alone is enough to sort out this question. But the second one about the difficulties, it's actually quite involved. The minimum turnover level here, below which companies will not be kwijtgeskeld. What does that be? Given some leniency is only 2.5 million. Now, let's say a husband and a wife, it's a family business, and they're the co-owners. They will now not be able to continue trading. They will be forced to shut down, even if they're just a small couple of people within its own family business. And then there's also the problem that as maybe it's still possible to comply with the regulations now, but there's no internal logic to the minimum level set by the regulator. Maybe in a month's time, it decides it has to be level 7, or 2 years down, it's going to be level 4. The regulator we cannot have a society where some low-level bureaucrat decides what the entry requirements for participation in the economy is.
Okay, I'm going to come back to all of that and the principle of that in just a moment. There's one other issue I just want to tackle first. As far as you're aware, would there be a demand or an obligation on the regulatory authority to consult the industry before imposing a regulation like this?
I speak from my understanding of how regulation processes work, and the requirements, as far as I understand them, is that there would be some requirement for consultation. This was, however, simply announced about 6 weeks ago in March. This was just announced in a webinar that this will now be the case, stated as a matter of fact.
Okay, to the principle then. You, as Sakalicha, as I understand it, have always opposed black economic empowerment. We know our society is defined by racialized inequality. And if we don't do something, if we don't use affirmative action, if we don't use black economic empowerment, the argument goes, we will never be able to create diverse workplaces. And I appreciate what you say about, husband and wife, stores, small agencies, etc. But I think the argument can also go that all South Africans have a duty to work against our racialized inequality, which defines our society, and the government has a right and an obligation, in fact, to do that. And that's what it's trying to do here. It is trying to use the levers that it has, that are available to it, to reduce our racialized inequality and at the same time, and I think this is important, create diverse workplaces.
Well, the first remark there would be that we must distinguish between what a low-level regulator is doing, a rogue regulator, should I say, versus what Parliament is doing. We can have a proper debate about this in Parliament, and these exact questions you have would be legitimate questions to have there. But we cannot have regulators out of their own, outside of the scope of their powers as defined in law, precisely why we have a Parliament, go and issue these arbitrary dictates. So this is not an attempt through proper channels to have a debate and a consideration of the questions you've just posed. This is a fiat decision at a bureaucratic level that should not be accepted. Then, as to the merits of BEE, we must remember that in its best understanding, black economic empowerment is an attempt to create a flourishing society for black people especially, but as in connection with all other communities in the country. That's a laudable goal. But BEE has achieved exactly not that. One person that I think we can refer to here is just a few days ago, Dr. Samit Swanyane passed away. He was well known and somewhat controversially known as someone who opposed black economic empowerment, saying that it kills self-reliance and that it is harmful. That is Sakalicha's position as well. We think BEE is harmful and it works against the flourishing of society, including the flourishing of black people, because it puts the cart before the horse. It prioritizes the interests of business people, and with business people, I mean a small group of owners and a small group of senior people, instead of prioritizing what is best for consumers and clients and the public. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I hear you on these arguments, and Pete, this is a conversation that I think our society is still going to have for some time to come. Let me build an argument against you, and it would go something along these lines: that if you look at estate agents, they often tend to be in suburban areas less transformed than other industries. One of the reasons for that may be because some of them are quite small. Okay, but this also has other consequences. It means, for example, that a white homeowner coming into a suburb gets a certain level of service because the estate agent is run by white people. And black homeowners wanting to move into the same suburb may not get the same service. In other words, diversity matters all the way along the chain. And if I were to argue for the regulator for a moment, I might say something along the lines of, if we want real diversity in our suburbs, if we want real diversity in the property industry, we actually need to do something, because the industry itself has not done something, has not moved quickly enough. And therefore, at some point, you have to stop with the carrot and haul out the stick. And that's what they're doing.
Well, firstly, they have no right to do that. If that's a discussion to be had, it's a discussion to be had in Parliament. But let's entertain the argument. Let me just
Can I just say,
clarify
Peter, and
your question.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You keep saying in Parliament, but in Parliament you would oppose it too. So I do want to hear the argument about the principle.
True. Right. No, so agree. But we're just not going to entertain the regulators' actions. They're ultra vires. But if we were to have this in a proper forum, I would start with a question. I want for clarity. Why do you say a black person moving into a suburb would get a different level of service than a white person?
My point is around how people are perceived and how people are seen. And if you look at what's happening in our suburbs, you can see that the pace of change isn't as quick as it should be.
Yes, but what I'm just curious. I'd like to respond, but in what relationship would a black person looking to buy a home get a different service from a white person trying to get home?
Well, it may well depend on the practitioner. I'm not saying that all estate agents would do that, but I'm saying that certain people moving into suburbs may get that impression.
It's not clear to me that would be the case, but there's nothing in the Act that prevents a black person from going to the estate agent that he prefers, and there's also nothing in the law that prevents people from starting black-owned estate agencies. In fact, that certainly happens. About at least, I think, about a third of Fidelity Fund certificates issued are to black people, as far as I understand. So there's nothing that prevents that from happening currently, as far as I know.
All right. Pete Leroux, we'll leave it there. I'm sure this debate is going to continue. Thank you. Pete Leroux is the CEO at Saka Lega. We will, of course, try and get a right of reply from the Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority on this. 20 minutes after 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, the politician and lawyer Leonard Max has resigned from the Freedom Front Plus. He claims that some people in the party have used racist slurs against him and against coloured people. He also says he wanted the party's mission statement to be changed because at the moment, it says the Freedom Front Plus is committed to the realisation of communities, in particular the Afrikaners' internationally recognised right to self-determination. The chief whip of the Freedom Front Plus is Dr. Corné Mulder. Dr. Mulder, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity.
Leonard Max is clearly very angry at your party and maybe at you personally as well. He says people in the party have used racist names or words. Have people in your party used those phrases?
No, that's a blatant lie, and he knows that. Let me start off by saying one thing, and it's rather sad. If you read through his statement, it's clear to me that there's a lot of emotional baggage that comes from the past. Freedom Front Plus is not responsible for any of that, but even if you look at his statement, I'm not exactly sure if he blames the party for those things that he alleges in terms of racist slurs, etc. Read carefully. The impression I get is he's referring to people in his circle who says that because he joined a party like ours.
Okay, so you're suggesting you've done nothing wrong?
Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that, no.
Why do you think he's left the party then? I mean, what for you is the reason that he's left the party? Is it because he was coming under pressure from people in his own community? And let's just be clear, I mean, there are very few people from his community in your party, is my understanding.
No, there are lots of people of his community in our party. We've got members of other communities that are ordinary members of the party, that serve on branches, that are representatives on local level, that serves in the provincial legislature, etc. No, that's not the case. I think, first of all, there's a history. If you go and look around, there's a history of this gentleman moving from party to party after a while. That's the first instance. Secondly, at the moment, he's not a candidate in this election. And in the last 4 months, he was missing in action. So I'm choosing my words very carefully. It will have no negative effect on the campaign of the party. Let me tell you what it's about. When Mr. Max joined the party 3 years ago, he did express some concerns with regard to a provision in the constitution of the party. And what you quoted from just now is the vision of the party, that is section 3, but you quoted only the first section of that mission statement. The second part of that mission statement says exactly the opposite in terms of reaching out to all communities, fighting for the rights and everything of all communities. That's part of that first statement. So that was never in dispute. The problem that he's got is with Section 18 of the Constitution of the party. And Section 18 deals with the founding statement. When the party was founded 30 years ago, a founding statement was drafted. And that founding statement was drafted in the terminology of the political situation 30 years ago. So it refers to the fight against communism and other stuff. He had a problem with that. And I said to him, I understand that. That has never been changed in terms of wording and modernized, and the party will look into that. Then we started that process, but then we came to the conclusion, you cannot change a founding statement of 30 years ago. That was the founding statement. The parallel would be today to go to the ANC and say, well, you need to change the wording of the Freedom Charter of 1955. You can't do that. What we said we could do is, what we can do is to change the Constitution to say we don't expect people joining the party now to subscribe to some document that was written 30 years ago. We expect you to support the mission of the party and a declaration of loyalty. And we were busy in that process, but as I've said, he's not a candidate in this election. He was missing in action for the last 4 months, so it will have no negative effect on the campaign.
Okay, let me come at this another way. Do you, as the Freedom Front Plus, believe in the right of Afrikaners to self-determination?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, no doubt.
And what does that mean? Do you mean territorially, geographically, a piece of land?
It includes all the different forms of self-determination, and that's why you'll remember that in the Constitution you have Section 235, and Section 235 in the Constitution makes provision for self-determination, which could also include in a territorial entity, but it's not only for the Afrikaner. That could be for any community. So what we are saying is self-determination has different forms and levels. It could be a group, it could be a cultural self-determination, it could be a community. We support that, but not only for the Afrikaner. We support that for any community in South Africa who would like to go down that route. That's nothing new. Everybody knows that. Mr. Max also knew that. So that is not a surprise. And he's an advocate. He obviously did read the Constitution. So when he joined, he knew that.
Okay, well, why is self-determination so important? I mean, aren't we stronger together? Isn't that the point? I mean, why would you want to leave the rest of South Africa, however you describe that? I mean, I'm not saying that, people must lose their culture. What I am saying, though, is this idea of including territory in it is a complete mystery to me.
No, first of all, when you say leave South Africa, you are referring to the highest level of self-determination. That's not where we are. At the moment, there's no self-determination whatsoever. Self-determination is internationally recognized right where communities express themselves. The tragedy is that if South Africa was more of a federal state, most likely that would not have been necessary. But even federalism is a form of self-determination. If you look at the Western Cape, for example, the Democratic Alliance brought a bill recently trying to get the hold of more powers. That's part of self-determination because the community want to determine themselves what they would like to see and how the things work out. I think under the ANC for the last 30 years, with the ANC's kind of approach, people feel strongly about this. And the question is simply the ANC's approach of total centralization. Why should the ANC's Minister of Basic Education decide what children should be studying in KZN or in the Western Cape or in Northwest? Allow communities to take their own decisions. That's self-determination.
Okay, sure. But it also means that in the end we have South Africans who grow up in very different ways. And I don't know that that's such a good thing. I would argue that the one good thing about having a national education department and one national curriculum is that people who come from very different backgrounds all understand what it means to be South African. Isn't that important?
What does it mean to be South African?
It means that we have a set of common things that we agree on, and crucially, a common set of facts that we agree on too.
Yeah. Now, I know, I understand the theory, but if you look in practice, I'm not sure that we agree on those common things to a very large extent. And maybe for a specific reason, I think the ANC is at the root of the problem why we have this discrepancy in South Africa. I understand that. The fact of the matter is the party has been saying throughout that, yes, we understand, we are part and parcel of South Africa, and we have been playing that role. Everybody that looks at the Freedom Front Plus knows that exactly we have been playing that constructive, positive role for the last 30 years. We will continue to do that. Part of that is to say, but we also need to recognize the diversity. In other words, unity and diversity. Maybe we should put some emphasis not only on the unity part, but also respect the diversity. That's why we've got 11 official languages. That's part of the reality of South Africa. And I honestly believe from our party's perspective that the recipe for nation building has been wrong for the last 30 years. Why didn't we succeed? The recipe currently used, we are stumbling from one sporting event to the next. You'll remember World Cup 1995. Huge enthusiasm for South Africanism. Then after 3 months, it's gone. We saw the World Cricket Cup, then the Soccer Cup, etc. But it doesn't last. There's a different recipe necessary by doing what? By recognizing our diversity, not as a division, but as a strength. Allow communities to also do things that are important to them. then they won't mind to be part of the bigger whole. But that's a completely different discussion. And that's the philosophy of the party for the last 30 years. We've played that constructive role. This gentleman, when he joined, knew exactly that was the case. The fact that he's leaving, that is something else.
Dr. Corné Mulder, thank you. Chief Whip of the Freedom Front Plus, 29 after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zaya, Sundown's going to do it tonight.
Well, Chiefs are saying not in our house. Let's see if they can hold the fort against Sundowns, who are on the brink of the 2023-2024 Premier Soccer League title. They just need a win against Chiefs, all happening at FNB Stadium tonight to secure a record-extending 7th consecutive championship with 6 games to spare. Now, last night, Morocco Swallows showed their fighting spirit. They defeated Chippa United 2-1. SuperSport United finally recording their win. They defeated Royal AM 1-0 at the Harry Gwala Stadium. And Orlando Pirates turning up the heat against Cape Town City, 2-0 the score there. And Stellenbosch reclaiming second place. They had a 3-0 victory over Golden Arrows. Elsewhere, Chelsea manager Mauricio Pochettino expects another emotional night when his side takes on his former club, Tottenham Hotspur, at the Premier League in Stamford Bridge. Pochettino paying tribute to the amazing career of veteran defender Thiago Silva.
Of course, he's an amazing guy, he's an amazing professional. The player, the fans, the club is going to miss him. And of course, but he's happy, he's so proud about his career here in Chelsea and in different clubs also. And only to wish the best, because he deserves the best.
And finally, rugby. The junior Springboks intend to make a statement in their opening under-20 rugby championship clash with New Zealand this morning. 9 a.m. is the kickoff in Australia. The under-20 rugby championship was established by SANZA following the struggles of Southern Hemisphere juniors in last year's under-20 Rugby World Cup in Cape Town. More sport, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You're with SFM. Leading the conversation, it's just gone 7:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, the state and the defence will present closing arguments in the murder trial of rapper Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane in the High Court in Durban today. 6 people accused of the murder of the Kaizer Chiefs soccer player Luke Fleurs are expected to apply for bail in the Roodepoort Magistrates Court west of Johannesburg. And a South African Post Office employee Bonisa Nimzobe has attributed the retrenchments at the state-owned enterprise to political interference. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the further we go into this Thursday morning, the more information we're receiving about blockages around this taxi strike in the Eastern Cape area. We thought initially it may have sort of been centred around East London and maybe the N2 route around Dutwa and Butterworth, where a lot of the sort of recipients of the payments that's at the heart of this issue are sort of affected. But it is a lot wider than that. We're just seeing blockages now at Elliot, at Paddy, at Somo as well. So really, Coffin Vaba on the R61. It really is quite widespread. It's probably not the day to be driving through the Eastern Cape if you don't have to. Wait until this situation is resolved and then have a go at it hopefully tomorrow, because motorists are literally just driving along a road and then coming into a blockage and unable to move, and no sort of alternative route options, or if there is an alternative route in parts of the Eastern Cape, it represents a massive sort of detour, and you may hit an obstruction along that route as well. So plenty of routes are being blocked off right across the Eastern Cape, and a day to avoid travel through the region, especially if you're a truck driver, because some trucks are being used and commandeered to block roads, and then the keys are taken away. So you don't want to end up in that situation either. Joburg side, the bike one going north, a crash up by Houghton Drive. Very heavy this morning from Boysons up through yesterday's fire section of Braamfontein, and all the way into that Parktown area. N1 through Midrand, busy, but not what you might be expecting. Funny week with the public holiday squeezed in the middle. There is some volume missing. Durban, we've got a breakdown. N2 north after Spaghetti Junction, so extra delays coming up through the Bluff exit M7 on your way towards Westwood Mall. And Cape Town, the earlier crash on the N2 into town at Borchers Quarry Airport section has basically been cleared. Traffic is busy, but it is moving a lot better. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
In Taoleng, Lechele, morning again. How are the markets?
Well, most Asian equities traded higher after Fed Chair Jerome Powell kept rates unchanged and downplayed the prospect of further interest rate hikes. The yen, however, resumed losses after a sudden jump yesterday that hinted at intervention from the Bank of Japan. Now, taking all of that into account, Tokyo's Nikkei trading pretty flat, losing 0.04%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng gaining over 2%. Looking at Wall Street now, futures are advancing as investors looked ahead to more corporate earnings and key labor data that's out tomorrow. Now, this comes after a mixed session yesterday when we saw the S&P 500 and Nasdaq ending in the red. On the local front, market participants will be digesting the Fed's rates decision and local factory activity as it kicks off the first day of trade for May. And in currency movements, we've seen the dollar slightly ease, which has worked in our benefit as the rand trades stronger at 18.57 to the greenback.
And then the weak demand weighing on the automakers from the EU.
Yeah, well, some of our fave automakers kicked off the year on a bad note. VW, Mercedes-Benz, and Jeep owner Stellantis recorded downbeat earnings for the first quarter. VW and Merck both posted double-digit earnings decline, while Stellantis' revenue fell 12%. Now, these European car makers were hit by weakness in car sales, which affected mass market and top-end models. They're also dealing with low demand in China as competition on that end intensifies from domestic automakers. Despite the downbeat numbers, Stephen, there seems rather to be some optimism. The automakers have promised that there'll be improvements and have stuck to profit and sales targets for the year as they're about to debut new models. All three companies are also delving deeper into that electric vehicle market in attempt to compete with Tesla.
And then MTN Nigeria posting a loss in the first quarter.
Troubles in Nigeria just continue to eat into MTN's group's overall profit. Now, during the half-year financial period of 2023, we saw MTN reporting an over 70% pledge in profit. And coming into 2024, issues in the West African country have not subsided. Now, that unit, as you mentioned, recorded a first quarter loss of close to 393 billion naira, compared with a profit of 108 billion naira a year ago. Now, the company has pointed to challenging operating environment characterized by elevated levels of inflation and the depreciation of the naira. The CEO of the Nigerian unit, Carl Toriola, doesn't expect these risks to go away anytime soon, saying that continued sticky inflation and unpredictable foreign exchange rates remain significant challenges for the business, as this is not in its control. Now, MTN Nigeria says it will focus on the things that are in its control, particularly growing service revenue and strengthening its balance sheet.
Ntaleng Lechela, thank you very much indeed. Back tomorrow, more business news through the day here on SFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, lots of conversations this morning. You've heard the arguments around and the conversations around black economic empowerment. You heard a few moments ago the Freedom Front Plus as well. Mark on the line from Durban. Hi. Black economic empowerment, go for it.
Yes, Stephen, I get very frustrated sometimes when I hear people talking about it. To me, it's a no-brainer. We need black economic empowerment, full stop, in this country. The problem is people see it as either you have it or you don't. And what I'd like us to be doing is to having much more nuanced discussions about how to make this thing work and make it realistic and look at where there are problems and pitfalls and then address those, rather than just saying chuck the whole thing out altogether. I mean, to me, it's a stupid argument to say that you don't have any black economic empowerment. And that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
All right, Mark. Thank you. On the line from eThekwini. All right, I appreciate that. Interesting point. Thomas on the line from Newcastle. Thomas, hi. Also, property practitioners, estate agents and BEE. How do you see it?
Steve, you know, the gentleman that you were talking to earlier not mentioned Tatem Sonya.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have called because when I heard in his biography, no, it's not biography, what you call it after a person has died.
An obituary, yeah.
Yes. They are saying he's the guy that started the bank that right now affirmative action is busy killing. That got to me, Steve.
Yeah.
And he said black economic empowerment is killing the economy. And the bank is busy dying, this African bank. And it's being, there's pilfering of note in that bank right now, just like it's happening with Itala, just like it happened with VBS. So I think as South Africans, leave politicians out because we know they are politicking. They don't believe a word they say. As South Africans, let's move away from this thing of a handout and start working hard. This old man, he was an old man. He managed to raise R1 million, Steve, then. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And started the bank. And apartheid government was saying and putting all stoppages. What happened to that spirit with us, the South Africans? Now we sit and we want to be fed all the time.
Well, Thomas, yeah, look, I think it's difficult to judge, everybody else by the sort of ability of a few extraordinary people to do amazing things, and we shouldn't demand that much. But I hear your bigger point, and I know there's a strong strand of political thought in this country around that, in a way, and I'm not an expert, but Steve Biko was saying something sort of maybe related to it.
Exactly, Steve. And the unfortunate thing is the politicians don't want to talk into things that is going to cause the poorest of the poor, as they would say, to say, you know what, let me stand up and do something for myself. They don't say that. They are always saying, we will look after you. We are not a socialist government, and socialist governments don't work.
All right.
We should know that by now.
Thomas on the line from Newcastle. Thank you. Jacques in KwaZulu-Natal. Hi, Black Economic Empowerment.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
I'm well. Go for it.
Okay. In connection with BE, both the situations in terms of the Freedom Front Plus as well as the state agent. BE is something that was needed in the country without a doubt.
Yeah.
There's an issue but that I do have as an Indian person with BE. BE doesn't seem to work for the taxi industry. So myself as an Indian, you as a white, where's our equality in terms of a situation like that where the taxi association is maybe 99% black owned?
Yeah.
So that would go there where it doesn't work. It doesn't work in our soccer team because I don't see any Indians in the soccer teams. I don't see any of the things. And the argument would be that if we don't get grassroots level sort of situations for Indian people to play soccer, we're never going to play soccer. So we're always going to be at a disadvantage. But that's not the argument. The argument is that for both of the arguments that were before this, is that as individuals we have a right to open our own businesses. We have a right to strive and make our businesses work. BE is there to assist black people to do it. But that still doesn't mean that they would be guaranteed that their businesses would work or that they have to join a certain party. Party politics or politics within parties is basically determined by the parties themselves, and you know what you get into. You can't say that you want to get into this political party without understanding that there's something that you don't like and you need to change.
No, sure. So Jacques, I hear you, but I think there are Indian people in the taxi industry, and I think in KZN.
Correct, you're 100%, but what's the percentage?
No,
surely the percentage would matter, and there's my argument again. So if the Freedom Front Plus as a party says no, they want to go to Parliament and regulate the taxi industry in terms of we need some white sort of ownership within the taxi industry. There'll be a million other people that might say that no, they're wrong or they're racist or whatever it is. I think it's high time that we look at the world at large and we look at the people and the people that have a political status or the people that are saying things around the world. And basically, even in the States, they're saying the same thing. They don't want to be called black Americans. They want to be called Americans. I think we, too, need to realize this a lot quicker than they have, which has taken them more than 100 years. We need to understand that we are South African, we are different, we are diverse, and we can accept what we want to accept or not. Yes, the business is there, but even with BEE, there's no guarantee that black business person is going to make it in his life or in his business with all the assistance that government given.
All right,
so I think we need to just get down to that.
All right, Jacques in KZN, interesting point, thank you. Some interesting questions being asked there. Mfundo in Cape Town, Corne Mulder and Leonard Max, hi.
Yes, good morning, Stephen. Mfundo here, Cape Town. Stephen, I'm so shocked with what Mr. Mulder is advancing, let alone the resignation of Mr. Mark. However, for him to say why would then the National Department of Education to determine what subject must be studied. To me, it clearly shows, Stephen, the divide and rule situation that they confront want to advance. Because imagine, Stephen, if we are saying now first language in Southern Cape Town is Afrikaans, and first language in KZN is Zulu, and first language in KZN, in Eastern Cape is Xhosa, and in Jonathan, and so forth. Then imagine now we are going to England or London or so ever, and then we are saying, and then the question is, what language do you speak? And then we all come with this. Not to say that 11 different languages is wrong. However, we need to be centralized. We need to be identified by the central. I mean, really?
Yeah.
To me, Mr. Mulder is advancing the divide and rule situation, which we're coming from during the apartheid time.
Yeah. All right. Mfundo in Cape Town. Yeah, look, as I say, there's strong arguments in many directions on this. And it's one of the great sort of conundrums, I think, around education is that most children are at high school in English. If you allowed people to change that, and they are in the Eastern Cape with a lot of success, to Xhosa, for example, what happens then? 16 minutes to 8.
Molweni babukeli be-Kids Newsroom, igama lam ngumhlonto Buhle Kelepa, indlwakazi yasemampondomiseni, and we cannot wait to see you on SABC2 right here where you belong every single Monday at 4:30. See you there.
Stellies believe they know how to deal with giants like Mamelodi Sundowns, whereas Masandawana remains confident that Bafana Bastyle understands all strategies to make it to the final. This is the emotional encounter of the Nedbank Cup semi-final. Stellenbosch FC clashes with Mamelodi Sundowns FC this Sunday 5 May at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
That's the number to Ladysmith we go. Mbuyisa, hi. Black Economic Empowerment, go for it.
Good morning, Stephen.
Morning.
Yes, you know what? We should look at there's nothing wrong with black economic empowerment, but it needs to be monitored. But unfortunately, here in South Africa, let's take an example of the results of the black economic empowerment. Let's check Edwin Sodi. Sodi was empowered economically.
Yeah.
Which black did Sodi empower instead of politicians? So this DEE is problematic. It needs to be monitored. There's not we want it, but it should not be directed to why successful. Yes, then share the wealth, but let us use a DEE as a yardstick to see that, or the gateway to get into the economic empowerment. That's what I'm saying, because it is problematic. It seems it's like a quota. Quota is only applicable, a quota system. Here in South Africa, it's like it's only applicable to rugby and cricket, but when coming to soccer, it is not. So all we are saying that even those black successful people, they should actually empower other blacks. Because as I'm saying to you, you look at Edwin Sodi, who tell me of any black person you know that he has empowered after raking so many millions? None that I know.
Yeah.
So it should not look. There's nothing wrong. What people must share with us.
Yeah.
But
no, all right. Mbuyisa, I hear you. I think there is a difference, and I think there must be a difference between the sort of corruption that I think is the claim around Saudi and black economic empowerment. They're separate things, but I hear the bigger point that you're making. Tenga in Cape Town, hi. Black economic empowerment?
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to comment on that one. When this black economic empowerment was to be made, it was said that they want to advance the black people economically, because white people are already advanced. But the only thing that this thing is happening, it's not doing anything negative to the white people, but it's doing more disadvantage to the black people. Hence, I've been advocating that what we were supposed to do as black people, the point where we were supposed to start, it was to collapse the tribal authority system in South Africa and take the land which is under the tribal authority system and use it for economic development. Because we cannot have two forms of leadership in the same country. To ask a very simple question, what is it, even though it is legal, but what is it that the tribal authority system is doing in South Africa even to advance the lives of the black people? Nothing. Black people, they are living in those areas, but when they have to look for greener pastures, they have to leave those places and go to the white people who advanced during the apartheid time to look for employment again from those people. So where we were supposed to start, it was to collapse the tribal authority system in South Africa, then take the land that is under the tribal authority system and use it. But to give a very small example, there was a time where in Venda, one guy wanted to establish a mine in a place called Zibafunduzi. That guy was refused to do that by the tribal authority system. So what I think we were supposed to do as black South Africans, it was to come together, because we can change all these political organizations to lead this country, but as long as we still have the tribal authority system, we are not going to solve anything.
Yeah. All right, Tinga, I must say, Tinga, I didn't see us going from black economic empowerment to sort of communal land ownership in one move, but I think I hear your point. It's a much bigger economic empowerment point, and maybe an important one. And I know that plenty of people have suggested that actually, if you sort of give people ownership of plots of land, the economy would change. Tinga, thank you. Onati Nkobeka, hi. Black economic empowerment?
Yes, thank you. Morning, Stephen and SFM listeners. Black economic empowerment is a good initiative. The failures to it, one, it's the issue that there's no real monitoring around it. And it's based on relationships, and this is where the failure is.
Yeah.
And obviously, you can only enforce it on government-related issues, because if you look at the economy and how everything else is run, the white boys, they still control, a number of things, and they club together, they come together, so they would give services or empower each other. So if government is not doing the same to empower its own people, it would, and they only focus on the relationships, it's going to be a biggest problem that we have, and that's why we find ourselves where we are today. You would look, like right now we've got, and it's not that we don't have opportunities where we can be able, to implement this thing. We've got, you would look at, sectors such as maritime, where there is still an opportunity to introduce, new entrances, new black players, but where there is no monitoring and where government is not really sure in terms of how do they do it, we would always find ourselves in this same problem where things just fail and they look as if they are just only meant for politicians or politically connected.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's about that, isn't it? How decisions are made. Unatin Krabeka, thank you. 9 minutes now to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Update on Joburg's Mike 1 through Braamfontein. The road is open this morning, but it's very slow. Queues from Boysons all the way through to about Glenhove Road in the sort of beginning parts of Melrose, if you like, on your way to Stanton. It's all backed up through there. There's just been a crash on the M1 north at Buccleuch. So traffic that was busy coming around from Randburg is just getting even busier. There's traffic on that route between Bayers Nordia and that crash scene up at Buccleuch interchange. N1 through Midrand, not too bad this morning. It is busy, obviously, but not as bad as it can be. Durban, a breakdown before you hit the roadworks on the N2 north at Spaghetti Junction, so that traffic coming through from the Bluff exit remains heavy. It's causing a delay on the N3 outbound from Sherwood and the N3 inbound from Pavilion Mall, just trying to get into that N2 and up through 4 level. It looks like the breakdown's probably by the ramp as you come off the N3 onto the N2 north or turn up towards Mgeni Road. A crash on the M4 at Blue Lagoon, delays both ways. The crash on the northbound, but southbound being held as well. Driving into Cape Town, the N2, a collision by the airport exit. Traffic that was recovering and moving better is all of a sudden grinding to a halt from the R300 as you make your way past the airport runway and down in towards that particular crash. In a Marine Drive for this time of morning is very slow. It is a misty morning around Cape Town, so there's probably some mist there, but looks like there might be an issue before Racecourse Road, before the paddocks in Milnerton. Traffic coming out of Tableview backs from Bayside Mall. That's very heavy for this time of morning. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
7 minutes to 8 now, the time. Well, plenty going on this morning, as you know. You know the number 086 000 2032. There's been some interesting data sort of coming out of Workers' Day suggesting that the number of formal strikes has declined, but the number of wildcat strikes has actually increased. And it's a really important trend because we know how important these trends are. Sydney Moshualiba is an education officer at the Casual Workers Advice Office. Sydney, good morning. Are there any reasons as to why the number of formally declared strikes are going down?
Yes, good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners. We see there is a trend where wildcat strikes are becoming higher than the protected strikes. Basically, the reasons vary in most cases, but we find that in most cases it's issues around unpaid wages or overtime, or issues around permanent jobs, issues around extension of contracts, end of outsourcing, and to flexible working conditions. So there's other areas where you find that there's no union organization that is happening, and workers will simply embark on strike. This is imminent when you look at the recyclers, you look at sex workers, look at domestic workers, early childhood development center workers, community works program workers, and e-hailing workers from Uber and Bolt. These are some of the strikes that took place without involvement of any union organization.
And isn't that a problem? I mean, I know employers don't always like unions, but they do at least bring stability to a situation. If you've got an ununionized sector like e-hailing drivers, for example, that you talk about, then it becomes very unpredictable. And I don't yet know of a union that's been able to successfully organize in this sector.
Yes, I think the issue that we pick up around these kinds of wildcat strike is that there's definitely a growing need from the side of workers to seek stable and permanent jobs. And in this current situation of a hostile capitalist environment, there is always going to be a conflict. And the question of whether workers are organized or not organized becomes secondary.
Are you expecting more wildcat strikes over the next year or so?
Well, we look at the trends and we think that as long as there is continued short-term jobs being offered in the market, outsourced services from the government side, wildcat strike will continue to rise.
Thank you very much indeed. Sydney Moshualiba is an education officer at the Casual Workers Advice Office. 4 minutes now to 8.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, there have been big problems with that fire in Table Mountain, the Table Mountain National Park, and the Skeleton Gorge started over the weekend. In fact, we're told by a lightning strike, which is fascinating to see the impact that a lightning strike can have. Thousands of hectares have been affected by this. Let's speak now to Lauren Howard-Clayton. She is the spokesperson for the Table Mountain National Park. She joins us. Lauren, good morning. We know this fire went for several days. Is it still burning now?
Good morning, Stephen, and thank you for having me. So the fire line was rather quiet throughout the evening. It's contained as far as possible. The back table section of the park has been fully contained, but you will notice that there will be some smouldering of logs as well as certain hotspot areas above Kirstenbosch, the cliffs above Kirstenbosch. So we're excited to announce that the trails have been reopened in Constantinik as well as the back table. It's just the contour path and Skeleton Gorge above Kirstenbosch that still remains closed at this stage.
Trying to make sure that it's safe is going to be a little while before you actually know when it will be safe and how safe it will be?
The crews walked the line yesterday evening, and some will walk the line this morning as well. And so far, it's been safe, but there are a lot of damage to the trails. So we ask our users to be very cautious when carrying out their activities within those areas, and not to walk in the burn area.
Okay. And the thing that started the fire, we understand a lightning strike. I mean, very difficult to protect against that. I mean, it must have been a bit of a surprise.
That's correct. I mean, if you look at the weekend where we experienced the inclement weather, we actually responded to about 4 fires that were caused by lightning strikes. And it was a bit busy for our firefighters over the past couple of days.
And then the damage, I mean, is there going to be long-term damage that's actually going to be causing big problems, or do you think that the area will recover quite quickly?
We are going to assess the trails. Like I mentioned, we've assessed many of the trails, and it's safe to say that they are open. But the contour path in Skeleton Gorge, that needs to be reassessed as the trail damage is quite extensive. So a lot of maintenance work will take place from here on out.
Thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Lauren Howard-Clayton is the spokesperson for the Table Mountain National Park, and really amazing to see the damage that can be done by a lightning strike. And then, of course, also, we have fires there on a regular basis, so very, very different. Lots going on. In the next little while, we're actually due to speak to the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross and head of the Red Cross in Congo, Francois Moreloin. And we have soldiers in the DRC, and particularly in the area around Goma, in the east of the DRC, where we've seen that militant group M23. They have been, attacking there. That's why our soldiers are there, to protect civilians. So we'll find out the impact that our soldiers are having from an independent party. I think could be quite important. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning to you. It's Thursday morning. It's just gone 8 o'clock.
In our top stories, bail application for AKA murder accused to continue, and Eastern Cape Scholar transport shut down illegal. Good morning. The state and the defence will present closing arguments in the murder trial of rapper Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane in the High Court in Durban today. Forbes and Mutswane were killed outside a restaurant in Durban last year. The 5 accused, Lindukuhle Mkwanaze, Lindani Ndimande, Siyanda Mieza, Mziwete Mbagwabeni and Lindukuhle Ndimande will appear in court. During the last appearance, the accused submitted their replying affidavits in support of the application for bail. Gwebeni, who is believed to be the alleged coordinator of the killings, has denied any involvement. 2 other suspects are in custody in Eswatini awaiting the outcome of an extradition application. 6 people accused of the murder of Kaizer Chiefs soccer player Luke Vleers are expected to apply for bail in the Roodepoort Magistrates Court west of Johannesburg. The state requested time to verify certain information contained in the statements of the accused in their previous appearance. The 24-year-old soccer player was gunned down in a hijacking at a petrol station in Roodepoort last month. The accused faced charges of murder, aggravated robbery, possession of firearms and ammunition, and defeating the ends of justice. A South African post office employee, Bonisani Mzobe, has attributed the retrenchments at the state-owned enterprise to political interference. Nearly 5,000 post office workers are facing retrenchments. This after the Joint Business Rescue Practitioners, BRPs, announced in a statement on Tuesday that the Temporary Employee Employer Relief Scheme TERS application was unsuccessful. The Joint BRPs Anush Raplal said that the earlier withdrawal of the termination letters was conditional on the success of the TERS application. Mzobe says workers were hopeful that previous executives would turn around the situation.
Workers had strong belief that Mr. Barnes is changing the outlook of post office. We started to see some improvement. Unfortunately, the political space that is always interfering with the post office. We have lost a very good CEOs in post office. Going back to Mr. Mambeula, he was one of the best CEOs that post office has ever hired. But what happened? Political space came in and then they removed him.
The Eastern Cape Transport Department says collared transport operators' planned total shutdown of the province today will be illegal. It says the operators' action is over the department's non-payment of their dues. The department spokesperson Unati Bingoshe says the non-payment is due to technical glitches and some of the operators' refusal to sign contracts. Bingoshe says the next 5 million rand payment will be made tomorrow.
Eastern Cape Provincial Government as well as the Department of Transport are calling on those who are advocating for a complete shutdown to rather revisit their decision, as the impact of that will be overreaching, affecting the elderly and the frail will be out to collect their social grants, not to mention their fellow taxi operators who are dependent on the taxi rank, on the daily commute of people to make ends meet. The province will, however, ensure that there are boots on the ground for any eventuality.
Further afield, and finally, the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris says the repealing of a law banning abortion in the state of Arizona deprives women of the right to choose. Senators in the state have voted to repeal a 19th century law banning abortion unless the mother's life is in danger. The bill was revised after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right of women to termination. The Vice President gave her reaction.
This is a fight for freedom, to make decisions about one's own body and not have their government tell them what they're supposed to do.
Recapping the top story, the state and the defence will present closing arguments in the murder trial of rapper Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibela Tibbs Mtswane in the High Court in Durban today. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM sports headlines. It's soccer action tonight. Mamelodi Sundowns on the brink of clinching the Premier League soccer title, and it's Kaizer Chiefs who stand in their way. Plus the Junior Boks ready for a fiery start against New Zealand in the Under-20 Rugby Championships. All this and more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Bit of crash on Joburg N1 north at Becluge. So the traffic that was backlogging from Randburg through to Sunninghill anyway, as it normally does, is now just extending through Sunninghill and down to Becluge. So from Malabongwab to Becluge, it's just a backlog of traffic moving slowly there. N3 out of Germiston up through Bedford View, being held by that left lane closure at Van Buren Road. It's a pretty good run through Midrand. In fact, Pretoria coming from sort of Linwood Road, Atterbury Road, all the way down through Midrand. It's a pretty easy Thursday this morning. KZN, we've got a collision scene just north of Durban on the M4. It's the Ruthfirst Highway at Blue Lagoon. Traffic both ways between Durban and Umhlanga being held up. Breakdown at Spaghetti Junction, so the N2 North is staying very heavy backlogs from the M7. Bluff exit all the way through the Spaghetti Junction, then into the roadworks. And you've got backlogs on the N3 inbound from Pavilion, outbound from Sherwood, as you sort of battle to get off the N2 and battle to get off the N3 highway and turn into the ramps with that breakdown there. Cape Town, N2, into town, still slow approaching the airport exit. That's an earlier crash. You'll pick up the back of that queue at the R300. Marine Drive stays very slow for this time of morning out of Tableview through to Racecourse Road at the Paddocks in Milnerton. And multiple routes closed in the Eastern Cape area. Not the day to be travelling through the Eastern Cape. You could find yourself trundling down a road, find it blocked and absolutely nowhere to go. So it's a taxi strike. It is widespread right across the province. Multiple routes being blocked off and continue to be blocked off as we speak. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
6 minutes after 8, good morning. You're with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. In a moment, an important conversation with the head of the DRC delegation for the International Committee of the Red Cross, Francois Morelian. Basically, the situation there is very, very difficult. We have soldiers on the ground there trying to protect civilians against the M23 rebel movement. Rwanda seems to be involved, etc. We'll find out the humanitarian situation there. I think it is an important conversation. From 8:30, your mediated conversation today around whether or not people can actually be prosecuted for what they say on social media during the elections. We've seen big promises from government, but can they actually do it? A much bigger question. The number 086 000 2032 at 7 after 8.
The debate of universities will be witnessed on the field of play. The varsity derby between Amatax ladies and UJ ladies. Who are the most intelligent students? This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch the queens of the beautiful game. University of Pretoria ladies versus University of Johannesburg ladies on Sunday 5 May at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The University Registrar and Secretary to Convocation, Dr. Joel Baloy, cordially invites all members of the University of Venda Convocation to attend the AGM on Saturday, 11 May 2024 in Polokwane, Meropa Hotel at 10:30. The AGM will consider the Vice-Chancellor State of Campus report, the President of Convocation report, and amendments to the Constitution of the Convocation. To RSVP and confirm attendance, please visit www.univen.ac.za/announcements or contact Mr. Mashuda Ramarebo on 060-906-1902.
My name is Songezo Zibi. I am the leader of Rise Mzansi. In this election, it is clearer than ever that we need new leaders. South Africa suffers from deep inequality, violent crime, and poverty. This is caused by politicians who have run out of ideas. We deserve a South Africa that is safe, prosperous, equal, and united. But only new political leaders can achieve this. And these leaders do not exist in the old parties. At Rise Mzansi, we have the team South Africans would want to see in cabinet. We don't make empty promises. We have a plan to govern better. It is time to vote for new leaders. Vote Rise Mzansi on the 29th of May.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC.
Weekday nights on S3 are about to get lit. BBC Primetime will give you access to a hand-picked selection of BBC Studios' award-winning dramas, documentaries and factual entertainment, with titles such as Luther, Critical Cheaters, Top Gear Live at the Apollo, Louis Theroux, Forbidden America and more you simply don't want to miss out. Tune in to S3 from the 1st of May from 9 p.m. until 11 p.m. to channel the best of British entertainment with BBC Primetime only on S3. Open up.
Stay on top of all meaningful, top trending stories right here on SAFM. Leading the conversation.
10 after 8. Good morning. Well, let's get an update now on the situation in the DRC. And you know there's a humanitarian crisis in the North Kivu province around Goma. Goma, a major city in that region, pretty much cut off. To get aid there, you have to actually go by boat because of fighting involving rebel movements, including, we understand, M23. Now, you know, there are around 1,000 of our soldiers from the South African National Defence Force that have been deployed there as well to try and help keep civilians safe. It's a very difficult situation. And the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross delegation in the DRC is Francois Morelin. He's actually here for you now. Francois, good morning, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having us on your show.
Goma is a very difficult situation. You've got hundreds of thousands of people who need help there. How bad is it?
Well, the situation in DRC has gone through a difficult situation over the last 3 decades with ongoing fighting. But the situation has faced an uptick since October last year, when fighting resumed between the armed forces and the M23 around Goma. And the situation is becoming quite desperate given the lack of funding coming towards the direction of DRC that can be considered as a forgotten crisis in that regard, and the lack of interest by the public on this major crisis. We are talking right now about 7.2 million people internally displaced. We are also talking about all indicators being child recruitment, being sexual violence, being people directly affected by the conflict going through the sky in terms of numbers. So it's a very preoccupying situation we are confronted with in DRC, in the eastern part of DRC as we speak.
What kind of help do people need then? I mean, I presume you have to get them food, you have to give them medical attention. I mean, almost everything they need to survive, they need help with.
Yes, I mean, they are facing tremendous challenges because, for example, the city of Goma is now completely surrounded, and the population have been accumulating in the immediate vicinity of Goma. We are talking now about 800,000 new displaced people since October, and we are struggling to bring them aid. But first of all, because of lack of funding coming our way. So this is one important challenge. But you have also all the population that cannot access Goma, that are locked up across the front line, that need desperate access by the humanitarian actors to bring assistance, and that's what we are struggling with. And we are doing all what we can to access those and to bring them, in fact, health support, because many of the health structures have been either abandoned by the staff, given the threats they were facing, or destroyed, or we also see all the infrastructure going down the ladder. I mean, access to water is also an issue. Food is a major issue. In some instances, the population has not received any aid for months. I mean, if you look, for example, the situation of Ituri, we know about 170,000 people who are waiting for emergency food assistance for the last 4 months. So we're really talking about a crisis that needs more international attention, that needs more funding.
And then the fighting there must also make it dangerous for you to operate. And from what we can see, it really is the M23 rebel group that seems to be behind it?
So, I mean, the situation as we speak, we witnessed around more than 100 armed groups fighting in this region. So it makes any access extremely complex. I mean, the international community of the Red Cross, thanks to its mandate of bringing protection and assistance to the victims of armed conflict, and its knowledge of the field and the armed groups it is interacting with, manage still, as we speak today, to access those populations. But it's extremely complicated and dangerous. And those days, because of the intensification of the conflict, we have to seize any small window to access those populations and then pull back because the fighting resumes. So it's really a story of cats and mouse to really find the way to these people. And if the ICRC still manage to do it, or organizations like MSF, there are fewer and fewer actors that can manage this kind of situation, which represent an enormous threat for these people that are becoming more and more isolated.
And we have South African soldiers in that area in a sort of peacekeeping mission. It's quite a complicated history to it. Is that making a difference at all?
I mean, you have to understand that during the last few years, there have been many actors that came to try to bring a response to this crisis. And the deployment, as you speak of the SAMI, is very recent. So it's too early to judge about the result it is bringing. What I can say is what is a priority for us is to make sure that all actors present in the fighting area, all weapon carriers, do respect international humanitarian law, because that is what is generating displacement. That is what is killing civilians. That is what is destroying houses and bringing misery to these people. Just to give you some figures, I mean, if you look the year 2023, we have several programs where we assist hospitals, and one is in Goma. Last year, we accumulated 1,550 cases, operation of weapon wounded. In February this year alone, we went up to 350 cases. That means in 1 month alone, the number of weapon wounded have reached a third of all caseload for last year. So it really indicates about the deterioration of the situation. Moreover, if you look at this figure, 45% of those are civilians, and 40% of those are wounded with shrapnel, which also shows the use of more modern equipment and that have worsened impact on the population.
It's so important to try and bring some kind of peace there. I mean, you would obviously welcome any kind of negotiated peace settlement that made the situation safer, I presume.
I mean, whatever can bring more stable situation and decrease the pressure on the population would be welcome and would facilitate our access. But again, this is not enough. What we also need is funding. Right now, the humanitarian sector is funded only around 17% of what it would need to respond to the magnitude of this crisis. And I mean, even if you have a situation that appears or become more stable, you will still need this funding if you want to carry on this response. We're talking about 7.2 million internally displaced. We're talking about 24 million people in need of emergency aid. And these needs to be answered as we speak, and cannot wait for a peaceful resolution of the conflict.
I think the situation also, you're trying to get aid to people. You need resources and money to get aid to people. Are you getting the donations you used to get? You'll make appeals, I know that, but you need resources yourself. Are you getting those resources?
Unfortunately not, despite all our efforts. And I mean, my mission today in South Africa is part of trying to mobilize the public, trying to mobilize all actors that are interested in the plight of the people in DRC to mobilize themselves, to look for additional resources for what I already mentioned is a forgotten crisis. I mean, we know the situation in Ukraine or in the Middle East right now has driven a big chunk of what used to come to our direction in Africa. And this needs to be corrected, this needs to be answered. We need more funding for such crises as in DRC. And that's what we are calling for, and I thank you for having us today, because this is a key message I want to bring to your auditors.
Thank you very much indeed. Francois Morillon is the head of the DRC delegation for the International Committee of the Red Cross. And it just shows you, it underscores so many different things. Firstly, how deep-seated that conflict is, the impact it's having on people there. The role also that South Africa is playing in trying to look after civilians is my understanding of it. And I think that's important. We need to concentrate on that. And then also what's causing it all, which is the fighting. And I suppose the M23 rebel movement, and lots of suspicion that Rwanda is sort of behind it. They've denied that. Although I think there's one meeting where it seems Paul Kagame, the Rwandan president, basically accepted that he was behind M23 or supporting it in some way. There are important conversations to have around what's happening in the DRC. Can you imagine looking after your children and thinking of the future they're going to have when you're bringing them up in a city that's cut off apart from a river? Just incredible. 20 minutes after 8.
I want to talk to this girl, but I'm shy, bro. Come on, go talk to her, bro. It's a masquerade party. Plus, the ladies love a man with a bit of mystery. Don't worry, we got you. Hey, girl. I just want to know who's behind that mess. From the moment I saw you, you stole my heart. Can I please get your number, babe? And I'll take your word. I promise to love you forever, and this I vow. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
I'll show you my face if you show me yours.
Let's face it, when you channel your inner superstar, every moment turns into a musical. Catch The Masked Singer SA, Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. and see who's hiding behind the mask. Channel A Better You with S3. S3, open up.
Stellies believe they know how to deal with giants like Mamelodi Sundowns, whereas Masandawana remains confident that Bafana Bastille understands all strategies to make it to the final. This is the emotional encounter of the Nedbank Cup semi-final. Stellenbosch FC clashes with Mamelodi Sundowns FC this Sunday 5 May at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
21 minutes after 8 the time. Well, from time to time you'll find an advert that really resonates, or an advertising campaign that really resonates with people. And you must remember, advertising is all about trying to change people's behavior. That's the point of it. One of the ones that's been really interesting has been a brand for a particular type of chicken. I think you know where I'm going. That's been making quite a lot of fun around load shedding. And it's actually now the result, it's now the topic of some academic research. research. Duane Kitching is a junior marketing practitioner at the University of Pretoria, but has recently finished a master's degree in looking at the impact of the Nando's advertising, which focused on load shedding. Duane, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored and ready for this.
Well, thank you for being available. It's so interesting when you look at advertising around current events, can be very dangerous. You don't know how it's going to go. And when you advertise around load shedding, that can also, you don't know how it's going to go. How did it work for Nando's?
I think, like you said, it's definitely a risk to touch on these pain points, and in academic we call it pain points, but it's really frustrations for South Africans. And if you look at other funny ads like the courier guy, which gave us a little bit of understanding what people can go through to survive South African conditions just to get your package, or what Nando's did, they made light and fun of something that's really a frustration for us, and that's what makes this that's what Nando's did right, because they made a frustration funny, and we can relate with that. Otherwise, it's just a pain point.
Is it also about relevance? And I think advertising sometimes, and I've seen some advertising campaigns just go wrong because they've tried to be relevant. You have to kind of know exactly what you're doing.
Yes, definitely. I do agree. As I said, it definitely depends on in academics, especially about your target market. And if you don't understand your target market, this frustration or pain point could be easily taken very wrong. And that's the funny thing in my research. I tested all these brand-related drivers like brand trust, brand performance, brand reputations, and did it really have an impact? And in the end, it was actually just about the brand. So brand love stood out. So the risk is definitely there, and you have to be relevant, but you also have to take a little bit of a chance, You never know which side it will go. But I think Nando's nailed it definitely.
Does it help that Nando's is a South African brand? And I know they're huge in the UK and in other parts of the world now. But if you look at some of the other people in the sort of chicken markets, KFC is a great example. They're part of a big international brand. Does that mean that they can't be quite as nimble or agile or as quick at responding to local conditions? So they have advertising, they have consistent advertising, but Nando's' advantage is that they're South African primarily.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it's definitely, I don't know, Nando's has this magic. I think it's maybe in the sauce, They always...
You don't need to advertise for them, yes.
Yes, the sauces is always there, but I think what they did right is that they just keep on providing engaging content, and that's not always like a trend or jumping on something that's a pain point. They just keep it engagement. I was there 2 days ago, and they had a survey. It says clean up your act, and for me it was fantastic. For a marketing person, it's a pun, and it's a great pun intended. And I think it's because they just know their target market so well that they keep on meeting the nail.
Are other brands able to compete with them? Chicken Licken's had some funny ads over the years. KFC maybe not so much, but obviously it depends on how you see it. Is it possible for other brands to compete in the same way? We don't really see other big brands trying to do what Nando's tries to do. There have been one or two sort of jokes about load shedding. I don't know if any of them have been quite as good.
Yeah, I think competing the fast food industry in a whole is very big. Like Nando's, their competition is not only chicken industries, it's obviously steers, and even now if we go to McDonald's or the third party like Mr. D or Uber Eats, Uber Eats is also very fantastic in their advertising recently, and I think there is room for competition, but you need to really establish your brand voice and brand identity, and that's what they did very well. However, I don't know if someone will get the funny aspect, as I think it's already part of Nando's identity, but it's because they were first, so they won this time.
Dwane, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. Dwane Kitching conducted that research and is currently a marketing person at the University of Pretoria. 27 minutes after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Super Sundown 7. Is it on for tonight?
Oh, yes. 7 heaven indeed for Sundowns. Not if Chiefs have their say. What a humdinger we can look forward to. Sundowns brink of securing that 7th consecutive Premier League title. They're preparing to face Kaizer Chiefs tonight at FNB Stadium. Sundowns, led by coach Rulani Mokoena, have maintained an unimpressive unbeaten streak this season, marking them as the clear favourites. However, the stakes are high as Chiefs, despite their uneven performance this year, have proven they can rise to the occasion against top-tier teams. Rulani Mokoena expressing a high level of respect for Kaizer Chiefs.
What would be the message is that we're playing against a very big team. We're playing against one of our arch rivals, and we're playing an important game that we have to go there with humility, with a lot of respect. And that would be the message.
Well, we turn our eyes to Queensland, Australia now, where the Baby Boks opened their Under-20 Rugby Championship campaign against New Zealand, kicking off at 9 a.m. at the Sunshine Coast Stadium. The South African squad, led by Zachary Porter, includes several veterans from last year's tournament, aiming to make a strong start against the formidable Kiwis. In the meantime, Philip Snyman, head coach of the Blitz Boks, is ready to inject some swagger back into the team as they head to Singapore for the next round of the HSBC Sevens World Series, with the inclusion of seasoned players like Siviwe Soyuzwapi, Dylan Sage and Roscoe Speckman, alongside the dynamic Dian Pretorius and Tristan Lades. Steeman is optimistic. Now the Blitz Boks face Spain, Samoa and France in their pool, aiming not just to top the pool, but to secure a spot in the top 4. With key players back, the Blitz Boks, they look formidable as they gear up for their first match against Spain tomorrow. Siviwe Soyuzwapi expressing his excitement and ready to do battle.
Roscoe has played with everyone in our system, high performance manager, all the coaches, and he brings a lot of experience, and it's really great to have guys that have been there, guys that that you can go to war with. And again, the guys that are also not as experienced, they bring so much to the team and really value their energy that they bring and their youthful exuberance, which is amazing for us that are a bit older.
Cricket now, Riley Rousseau and Johnny Bairstow struck quick-fire 40s, helping the Punjab Kings clinch a 7-wicket win over the Chennai Super Kings in their Indian Premier League clash against the Punjab Kings that took place in Chennai last night. And finally, tennis, Carlos Alcaraz, his bid to win a third straight Madrid Open title ended with a 3-set loss to Andrei Rublev in the quarterfinals. That's a wrap of your sport on Sunrise. We'll bring you more sport on SFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Monitoring social media during the elections, that's next. You're with SFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, a 1-year-old baby boy and an 8-year-old girl have been shot dead in the NY3A informal settlement in Gugulethu on the Cape Flats. Police spokesperson Wesley Tweak says the children were playing outside when unknown men started shooting at each other. The state and the defence will present closing arguments in the murder trial of rapper Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane in the High Court in Durban today. And former President Thabo Mbeki has called on the international community to intervene in the Sudan conflict. Members of the UN Security Council met behind closed doors on Monday to discuss the situation. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Heaviest delay that we got across the Gauteng Highway network at this stage is the N14. It's the Ben Schumann Highway going up to Pretoria. There's a crashing at Euphius Road, and that traffic backlogging as you approach that scene coming up from Centurion side. If you want to avoid it, Brakfontein Interchange up to Borta Avenue or the R21 exits, and you get a clear run through to Central Pretoria region. Durban, the earlier crash on the M4 at Blue Lagoon, that is being cleared. Still the broken down vehicle on the N2 North at Spaghetti Getty Junction. So the N2 remains heavy from as far back as the M7 Bluff exit up through, passing that vehicle and then into the roadworks, of course. Cape Town reasonably heavy on the N1 from N1 City side all the way through to the elevated freeway. Marine Drive behind that's a heavy queue coming through Pardon Island to get into the N1. And the earlier crash on the N2 inbound near the airport runway, still slowing traffic coming through from the R300. Quite a big backlog. By the time you get to the airport runway is where you are being held up. And just having a look at Strandfontein Road, if you're coming up from sort of Lotus River area on your way through to Hanover Parks, quite a backlog, Strandfontein Road into that Ottery side. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Hi guys, your favorite mom vlogger here, talking all things family entertainment with Deal or No Deal now on SABC2 weekdays at 6:30 p.m. Umalume is trying to make it onto the show and have his life changed quick. Amanda Malume. Mama and I are the #1 Mubango fans at 9 p.m. all week because the storylines stay hot. And my two little people can't wait for May when Raid the Cage kicks off with SABC2. See La Familia, keeping those family bonds strong. Until next time.
The debate of universities will be witnessed on the field of play. The varsity derby between Amatax ladies and UJ ladies. Who are the most intelligent students? This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch the queens of the beautiful game. University of Pretoria ladies versus University of Johannesburg ladies on Sunday 5 May at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
27 minutes now to 9 the time. Glad you're with us now for your mediated conversation. Earlier this week, you heard a conversation with the police ministry about the role of social media during the elections. On Sunday, the police minister, Beke Cele, said anyone who incites violence during the elections would be dealt with and would be prosecuted. As you know, politicians and political leaders and their supporters are using social media more and more often, and they're using it in new and sometimes very effective ways. But is it really possible to hold people accountable for what they say on social media? In the past, we've seen people making comments that are clearly inciting violence, and there have been no prosecutions. And it is also likely that some people on social media are likely to lie during the elections. Can they really be prosecuted? First this morning, the promises from government. Earlier this week, we spoke to the police ministry spokesperson, Lorenzo Tamba. We'll hear some of that conversation this morning. Then, what laws can be broken on social media? How difficult is it to actually get convictions? Zaniwe Ntatisi Asare is the director at Digitally Legal. And finally, how can you actually track down the people who are really responsible for what is being said? How do you act against sort of bot farms, organised bot activity? Jean Leroux is a research associate at the Atlantic Council Digital Forensic Research Lab for Sub-Saharan Africa. We start then with that conversation with Lorenzo Temba, the spokesperson for the police ministry from Monday morning, in which I asked her what plans did the police have for the elections.
Yeah, so the briefing yesterday was really to make it very loud and clear that the security cluster ministers, as you've rightfully put it, are not leaving anything to chance. But it's not really just lip service. For example, the police ministry and the SAPS management, Stephen, have spent quite a decent amount of time going and interacting with station commanders and district commanders, as well as provincial commissioners, to ascertain what plan do they have on the ground level come election day. And for us, it's not just about policing the 29th of May, but also policing before the day, on the day, as well as after the day. So we know that there's over 28,000 voting stations across the country, and the SAPS has identified about 500 of these voting stations as high risk, meaning that the majority of voting stations across the country are basically medium to low risk. So essentially what this plan also entails is that everywhere that where ballots are going to be cast, there will not be any situation where there isn't a police officer. So essentially, law and order will be the order of the day come 29 May.
Members of the cluster said yesterday that people would not be allowed to make inflammatory comments on social media, that people cannot incite violence. Will you be acting against people who do that?
100%. And not only that, so there has been a protocol that has been established, Stephen, between the Department of Justice as well as the detectives of the SAPS to really prioritize all election-related crimes. I mean, these also do have include, electoral fraud, corruption, removing, defacing political party campaign posters, and so forth. But more than anything, it's also about the power of social media that we have seen play out in various other aspects in our very recent history, Stephen. We know that social media is a very, very powerful tool. That is why the Justice Cluster has really, or rather the Security Cluster has really discouraged people from not only producing but also sharing, inflammatory messages or messages that seek to undermine the democratic process. And those people are going to be acted upon with these special courts that are basically being set up with the Department of Justice as well. But more than anything, it's really about, Stephen, just making sure that there's zero tolerance to anyone or any group that seeks to undermine the democratic process, whether it be online or physically.
Lorenzo, in 2021, you'll remember that people incited violence on X, Twitter as it was called then. No action was taken against them. Why should we believe action will be taken against people who do it now?
Well, in the briefing yesterday, the State Security Minister, and I don't speak for her, so I really want to shy away from that, but she did mention the fact that what's this? GCIS, government communications team, has been set up to monitor and look at some of the threats that are playing out in the social media space. But not only that, we know that the Hawks, for example, we've got a very active cybercrime act that basically speaks to that, Stephen. It speaks to how people can be persecuted if they are found to be in violation of that act. But not only that, Stephen, we've seen most recently when it comes to, for example, the Durban, the July unrest in 2021, where people have been taken to court because of their roles, the role that they have played when it comes to incitement of violence, especially online.
Okay, but I mean, you know exactly the cases. I mean, Dudu Zuma Sambudla during 2021 had images of fire and burning and saying it's time to take our country back. Still no action has been taken against her. Anyone you charged with inciting violence now would immediately point to these examples. There are others. She's just the first one that comes to mind. And to say you didn't act against people inciting violence on social media then, now you're acting against people who incite violence now. Why?
I wouldn't call it that. I mean, you're pointing at one individual, and we're talking about over 60 individuals that have gone through the court processes. Some of them have been found to have been doing exactly what you're talking about. So I think it's a bit unfair to just call on one person who, you rightfully put it, nothing has necessarily happened to them. Possibly they couldn't, find any possible evidence or enough evidence. I'm not a detective, Stephen, but I can say this, and this is the guarantee that has been put forward by the security ministers, that there is a section of the Cyber Crimes Act, and if it is transgressed, if there is incitement of violence that causes harm to others and is supposed to offend, those people are going to be put to book, and that's essentially what they have put out. And they're saying that they're also roping in services of the GCIS who are going to be monitoring and making sure that nobody really escapes and goes without being punished when it comes to doing something very very serious as such.
And the SANDF, normally the South African National Defence Force, does provide help during elections. Obviously, they're in Mozambique, they're in the DRC. We all know that the SANDF doesn't have enough money. Is it going to be able to make a meaningful contribution in these elections?
So if you look at the statement that was released yesterday and read out by the Defence Minister, it makes no mention of the SANDF, and this is very deliberate. But during question and answering, she did mention that if needs be, there will be the deployment of the SANDF. I think the messaging really around that is that, the country is not at war with its citizens. So the first go-to is not going to be taking out the army and patrolling the streets. But if the police are there for that, we believe that the police service is fit for purpose to do exactly that. As I've mentioned to you, there will be no polling station or voting station without a police officer. There is a proper security plan from the SAPS side to make sure that law and order resides on the day, before the day, and after the day. But if there is ever a need, and obviously this will be proven through an assessment, a further assessment, the SNDF will be taken out of his barracks and it will have to assist.
That is Lorenzo Temba, the spokesperson for the National Police Ministry, responding to the questions, of course, that conversation from earlier in the week. The conversation this morning on your mediated conversation here on SFM is, of course, around social media and what police can do to prosecute people on social media for comments that they make. Due to be joined in a second by Zaniwa Intasisi Asare, the cyber law, public policy and internet governance expert. They're important conversations around all of this as well, of course. In a moment, Jean Leroux as well, about the difficulties of actually tracking down the people who are responsible for that. All right, let's go to Jean Leroux in the meantime. Jean Leroux is the Research Associate at the Atlantic Council Digital Forensic Research Lab for Sub-Saharan Africa. Jean, good morning and thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
One of the big problems with trying to police social media is trying to prove who said what. You can have so many accounts all tweeting or talking about politics. It can be on Facebook, can be on so many other platforms. Is it really possible to monitor what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen, as your previous listener pointed out as well, I mean, you can have instances where it might look like there's sufficient evidence online. You can see posts which might seem like they are, causing incitement or inflaming tensions, but actually proving that and to a sufficient standard for a court of law, that's often where the big issue comes in. And I think especially previously, I don't think we as a country and our law enforcement in particular necessarily had the skills or the capacity to prosecute these things in a sufficient and proper way.
I imagine it also, can come in waves. There can just be so many. The volume must be so big. You don't really know how to even start.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartening to hear that GCIS is actually taking a monitoring approach to the selections, but simply because of the volumes. We've got civil society organizations that are doing similar type of work. I know Media Monitoring Africa and Real 411 are two of them that are actively monitoring for false information and fake news around the elections. But I mean, that's kind of a drop in the bucket at the end of the day. There's so many social media posts going out every single day on multiple platforms that it's impossible for even multiple CSOs to keep an eye on that. So having kind of government or state resources behind that, knowing what to look for, where to go and look for it, and having that type of capacity is paramount.
I mean, obviously, it can be very difficult to know who actually controls an account. I mean, it is very easy to set something up on Facebook or X or TikTok or whatever. You won't really know who's, to find the physical person who's behind it. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. I'm sure your next listener will go into a bit more detail, but the Cybercrimes Act does provide for mechanisms to, for example, prosecute things like incitement to violence on social media. But, during the court case, one of the things that you still need to prove is that this is the person that said it. You need to make that link between the social media account and the individual that posted that. And where that usually comes in is, you can either approach it from two ways, through what we usually use is open source investigations, looking at what they post, what they link to, the type of sites that they associate with, and then using that open sourced information to make a link with a particular individual by looking at their posting habits. But where law enforcement has a bit of a leg up there is that they can actually approach the platforms directly and request them for information about specific accounts, especially where it's linked to something like this, where there's a crime that's been committed. And in those cases, the social media platforms have in the past complied. They have provided things like IP addresses, cell phone numbers used to create the account, even login details in some instances. So there is an avenue there for law enforcement to, kind of identify the exact individuals even behind anonymous accounts.
At this stage, do we have any idea of where, the sort of fake accounts all come from? And I'm not asking for a legal view, Jean. I'm asking for, what the evidence publicly available suggests, where all these fake accounts actually come from.
I mean, Stephen, by and large, these look like local accounts. These are individuals. They speak our local lingo. They use our slang terms. It's not so much, a foreign type of interference as it is simply local politics playing out in this new field of social media. So we're seeing a lot of local actors, quite a few influencers that are starting to get on board. Even political parties themselves are engaging in this. Some overt, and I believe quite a few would be doing that covert as well.
The owner of X, Elon Musk, I mean, he said many times he's tried to remove fake accounts from X, for example. Has he had any success in doing that?
It almost seems like he's playing whack-a-mole, Stephen. As he's dismantles one botnet, a new one pops up. I mean, for quite a long time, we kept on seeing these cryptocurrency scams coming around. Every time you'd post or comment on something, you'd have a cryptocurrency scammer join in. And more recently, there's quite a bit more pornographic content doing the rounds. And it seems like they're struggling. I think a lot of it is just to do with the way that he's almost monetized engagement over content on the platform, which has resulted in this very toxic, very polluted information environment on X.
During an election, we're going to have a lot more things like this. I know in some countries, and on our continent, in fact, people have literally just closed down cell phone networks or data networks and said, you're not going to have the internet for the election. I don't think we could do that. I don't know if anyone's been able to measure the impact of that. What I'm trying to get to is, do we know if this disinformation, this lying, this incitement to violence on social media actually has an impact on election results?
I mean, drawing that link between election results and even non-inflammatory posts online is very difficult, because you're looking at a very broad base of individuals. All of the users on social media might not be voters, and then all the voters might not be social media users. So it's a very difficult cohort of individuals to pin down and research and investigate. But what we can see is, like, especially things such as shutdowns, where you basically dismantle or temporarily disable an entire social media network for, let's say, the duration of the elections. I mean, historically, that's done more harm than good. Even if you've got things like disinformation and misinformation doing the rounds, there are ways of tackling that doesn't involve shutting down the entire conversation. I mean, social media, as rough as it can get around, incitement and false information, is still a very vital tool to make sure that government remains accountable. If people come across posts that show, for example, ballots being misplaced, or where voting stations are closed down, or where there's the threatening of voters by a particular political party, all of those things can be shared a lot more effectively on social media. So having the internet shut down during an election because of the threat of disinformation isn't a solution. I think it's a much better approach to tackle the disinformation head on.
Jean Leroux, thank you, Research Associate at the Atlantic Council Digital Forensic Research Lab for Sub-Saharan Africa. Really appreciate the time. In a moment, we're hoping to re-establish contact with Zaniwe Ntatsisi. Anyway, one of those mornings. Zaniwe Ntatsisi Asare, the cyber law expert. That's next, 11 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just a note, there is some traffic building up into the Crown Interchange again. The traffic pattern has altered. It was a queue that sort of went through Braamfontein and then up through Parktown, various issues this morning. But just the Mike 1 from Boysons into the Crown and the M2 from Joe Slovo into the Crown for connections onto the Mike 1 to turn up to where yesterday's fire was. Very slow. I believe there's some investigation work that still needs to be done. It may be related to that. It may be something else. But just a heads up, it may be disruptive around the Crown Interchange area today. Crash on the N14 going up to Euthius Road on your way to Pretoria, top end of the Ben Schoeman Highway, queuing quite heavily. Durban's N2 North, the queue still with us between the M7 Bluff exit and Spaghetti Junction through to sort of Umgedi Road. It's a combination of roadworks and plus a breakdown in that mix as well. So the breakdown around Spaghetti Junction, and that's why the traffic from the M7 remains so heavily back. Victoria Embankment travelling into central Durban, looking quite slow. Closer you get to the city centre, the heavier that traffic flow gets. Just the latest update that we've had from the Eastern Cape, numerous road closures this morning, all to do with the taxi blockade. Currently, the Ganubi main road looks a bit of a no-go between the N2 and the Ganubi town centre. That section of the main road closer to the N2 than the town centre is currently standing still with protest action. And Cape Town, a collision that happened around about 6 o'clock this morning on the N2 inbound, just by the airport, still backlogging traffic. If you're driving in from Khayelitsha, you'll hit a queue from about the airport runway right through to that collision just by the airport exit. Marine Drive is quite slow this morning as well. Queues around the Woodbridge Island area, and then a heavier queue through Pardon Island on towards the N1 highway. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Getting more money into your pockets has never been this simple and exciting. With SABC's new Simple Watch and Win game show, you can get more Zaga in your pockets. Catch more Zaga every weekday on SABC1 at 9 p.m. You could win your share of 50,000 Rand. All you have to do to win is give the correct answer for the day. Just dial *120 *332 to hash to register and play. The cost is R1.50 per minute. You could win big with more Zaga. Only on SABC1.
The Chili Boys want to fight with all they have to get to the final. However, the Buccaneers are saying, "Angeke kulunge." The final spot is reserved for Ezimnyama Ngenkani. This is the 10th battle of the Nedbank Cup semi-final. Chippa United FC versus Orlando Pirates FC. This Saturday, 4 May at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The National Pulse.
But I mean, the same can apply then to, and it's a different issue, but the same can apply to former President Jacob Zuma as well. So both of them, it's like they may not be competing against each other, but in fact, there are posturings that are taking place on the national stage.
Zuma, his agenda, by the way, he hates Cyril Ramaphosa. And he hates Cyril Ramaphosa mainly because he thinks that Cyril Ramaphosa jailed him. So his interpretation of his imprisonment recently is that he was imprisoned by Cyril Ramaphosa. So he wants to punish Ramaphosa. He's on a personal mission. So how does he do so? He wants to make sure that the ANC under Ramaphosa loses power. And he would then emerge under MK to be part of those who are going to negotiate a deal to lead South Africa after the elections. That's the game that Zuma is playing.
Political analyst Prince Mashele.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Hi there, John Gericke here with promo number 4 for my show called The Weekend, Saturday and Sunday night. Now, one of the suggestions I've had for a better promo is to get a professional voiceover artist. So I've roped in one of the best. Angie, tell us about the show.
John, I have no idea what you're talking about. Who's awake between 10 and midnight on the weekend? Or if I'm awake, I'm out partying with my famous other voiceover friends.
Come on, Angie, just pretend. And action.
Hi there. John has asked me to tell you about his music show from 10 to midnight on Saturday and Sunday nights. I'm only doing this because he is my friend. It has great music and fun and feature... I'm sorry, John. This makes no sense.
Just finish, Angie.
Tune in this weekend, 10 to midnight, for the best music show on SAFM between 10 and midnight on Saturday and Sunday night.
Thanks, Angie.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
6 minutes now to 9 the time. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry, and I can't remember the last time this happened in your mediated conversation, but our final guest, we've just been unable to get through to. Not their fault at all. Just is one of those things. Does happen sometimes. So we did have them. We thought that we were going to be able to go to them, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to wrap up your mediated conversation today around social media and around the election. So sorry about that. We did think there might be some value, though, in listening again to what Yaki Saliers, the security expert, said ahead of the elections. He was speaking to us earlier this week. He is the chair of the Institute for Security Studies.
Stephen, I think that you put your finger on it a few minutes ago in your remarks when you made the point that I think what is the challenge is the run-up to the elections. Firstly. And secondly, of course, we know where the main contestation is, and that is in KZN, which is where MK, the ANC, IFP, EFF are going to battle it out. Secondly, probably Gauteng, and thirdly, possibly the Western Cape. These are all three regions that also have significantly high crime and murder rates. And then during the briefing, the Minister of Defence made it clear that of they'd identified about 500 voting stations, which are mostly at risk. And this is all good news. This indicates that the police, the security cluster, have done their homework. They've done an analysis. So I'm actually quite comforted by the preparations that we see. I think a lot of lessons have been taken from the July 2021 unrest, and there is everybody knows that these elections are going to be troubled. I think what is concerning, of course, is the ongoing killing of councillors. It's good to hear that a task team has been set up. Jackie Selebe years ago dismantled all the specialized units, and we see the police make a return to focusing on specific priority crimes. So generally, I think quite a comprehensive story and quite a reassuring story.
This issue of political killings, I mean, normally it's a local government phenomenon, and we see it actually during the contestation between parties and then inside parties as well. Is there a risk of that kind of thing now? Or do you think that risk actually might be reduced because it's not a local election, it's a national and provincial election?
That is in actual fact an excellent point, Stephen, because we know that local government elections, it's really about contracts, it's really about access to resources, and that is less of an issue at the provincial and national level. So let's hope that pans through in what we are going to see in the month ahead.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Can we avoid this being a race thing? When we're talking diversity and inclusion and equity, surely we should also be very deliberate about the penetration of particularly black women in these spaces.
We have, if you see in that article, 42% of children live in female-headed households. So women in South Africa play a massive role in looking after children and communities. And of course, then that means that they need the resources to be able to do that. There's a ripple effect in terms of the challenges we are seeing about women's economic advancement and women's advancement in the workplace, and how that affects the development and progress of families and children and so on. So I don't think we need to see it. It's not a race issue. It's actually an issue of this country.
Shireen Mutara, the founding CEO.
You are listening to The Full Circle. First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, I'm very sorry about the way your mediated conversation ended today. I know it's a little messy. I do apologize for that. We couldn't get hold of our last guest. You heard a little bit of Yaki Saliers there. That full interview available for you as a podcast from Monday. You heard also Jean Leroux, who is a senior investigator at Graphica NY, New York, looking at the investigations around social media. And then also you heard from Lorenzo Temba, who of course is the spokesperson for the police department. So yeah, sorry about the way that ended. Sometimes it just is what it is, and our guests do their best to be available for you, but there are technical challenges. There'll be a lot coming up through for you on SAFM today, and a lot more news as well. Of course, one of those sort of moments where just after a public holiday, going into a weekend, we're going to actually start to see, I think, things moving in terms of the elections, and lots more conversations, many more conversations rather, around what is going to happen and what is not going to happen. So, with all of that, I think it is going to start to be a busy couple of days. We'll go off to go and work on tomorrow's show, and we look forward to speaking to you again then. From Paul, from Mdu, from Melissa, from Stanza, from myself. Do look after yourself through the day. I know it's quite a strange sort of week coming back after a one-day public holiday, but I know that Friday is looming, and we'll be with you very, very soon. We will be with you tomorrow. Thank you for being with us today on SAFM Sunrise. You with SAFM leading the conversation. It's 9 o'clock.
In our top stories, 2 children shot dead in Gugulethu and bail application for AKA murder accused set to continue. Good morning. A 1-year-old baby boy and an 8-year-old girl have been shot dead in the NY3A informal settlement in Gugulethu on the Cape Flats. Police spokesperson Wesley Tweak says the children were playing outside when unknown men started shooting at each other. The children were caught in the crossfire. Tweak says they were declared dead at the hospital.
Guguletu police are investigating 2 counts of murder following a shooting incident in NY3A on Monday afternoon. The suspects fled the scene and are yet to be arrested.
The state and the defence will present closing arguments in the bail application of rapper Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane in the High Court in Durban today. Forbes and Mutswane were killed outside a restaurant in Durban last year. The 5 accused, Lindokuhle Mkwanazi, Lindani Ndimande, Siyanda Miyeza, Mziwe Temba, Gwabeni and Lendukuhle Ndimande will appear in court. During the last appearance, the accused submitted their replying affidavits in support of their application for bail. Gwabeni, who is believed to be the alleged coordinator of the killings, has denied any involvement. 2 other suspects are in custody in Eswatini, awaiting the outcome of an extradition application. The Freedom Front Plus has denied being an exclusively Afrikaner party, this after the resignation of advocate Leonard Max, who accused the party of advancing the interests of Afrikaners over other race groups. The FF Plus chief whip in Parliament and Western Cape Premier candidate Dr. Corne Mulder has described the allegations as unfounded. Max breaks down what he considers some red flags in the party's constitution.
18.3.2.2 says, namely to support Afrikaner national unity must be promoted. The following one is 18.3.2.3, the Afrikaner nation's right to self-determination, that is the right to govern itself in its own state, must be pursued as a non-negotiable right. And 18.3.2.4 states that a unitary state, as well as any other form of state, where others can politically govern the Afrikaner nation and where it may possibly be assimilated by others, is unacceptable to the Freedom Front Plus.
The former President Thabo Mbeki has called on the international community to intervene in the Sudan conflict. Members of the UN Security Council met behind closed doors on Monday to discuss the situation in Sudan amid growing tensions and military operations around Al-Fasher in North Darfur. A Sudanese delegation is currently in South Africa. Mbeki says he will hold talks with the delegation.
I've worked long enough with the Sudanese, so they have actually said that I know the problems that they are experiencing. I can't now walk away. So they expect me to be engaged. So we are indeed engaged with them because we've got to have to find a solution. But I'm saying the Sudanese themselves are insisting on that. So of course I can't say no, I'm not available. So we'll engage them and really have to try and find a solution.
And finally, the district attorney in Manhattan in the US says disgraced Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein will be retried in New York. This after having his 2020 rape conviction overturned on appeal last week. Weinstein's lawyer Arthur Aidala says he's confident about the retrial.
We will now digest every syllable of the prior testimony of all the witnesses. We will assemble a team of the best and the brightest and make sure that this case is litigated properly in front of an excellent judge. The difference between this judge and the last judge is night and day, and we're very confident that if it goes to trial, the only words we'll hear at the end of the trial are not guilty.
Recapping the top story, a 1-year-old baby boy and an 8-year-old girl have been shot dead in the NY3A informal settlement in Guguletu on the Cape Flats. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.1 FM in Johannesburg.
SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
My parents grew up in abject poverty, the kind of poverty where you walk to school in the winter without any shoes. They were the first to graduate in their respective families, and as a child I watched them excel in their professional careers as architect, as an electrical engineer. And they ran so many businesses, so many projects in their commitment to create the life they wanted for themselves and their children. And then in my early teens, I watched them lose everything they had built. And that could have been the end, and you may have never heard of me today. But lo and behold, I saw them get up and do it all over again. A few years ago, I was about to get on a flight from Johannesburg to Gaborone, and I sat next to a gentleman, and we happened to start speaking. And he said, you know, my daughter's name is also Rapelang. And I said, that's wonderful. I've never met another Rapelang. I would love to meet her one day. And we chatted it some more, and eventually he tells me the story that before his 3-year-old daughter was born, his wife and him were looking for a name. They wanted a Tswana name, an unusual name, and they couldn't quite figure it out. Until one day they saw something on TV, and it was this amazing story about this amazing girl, he said. And the name, it was exactly what they had been looking for. And without even talking to each other, they knew that this was the name. And he was trying to remember the name of this person he saw on TV, and I'm like, is it Rapelang Raban? And his eyes lit up, and my eyes lit up, and I thought the whole plane was about to come out of the sky, as I wondered how in this world does such a thing happen. A few months later, I met baby Rapelang, and it was for me one of the most amazing experiences of my life, to know that the things I have chosen to do and the life I have chosen to live could have had an influence so much further than I could have ever anticipated. Let me leave you with this quote by the Chinese philosopher Confucius. When we are born, we are given 2 lives. Your second life begins the day you realize you only have 1 life.
Rapelang Ravana, a UCT alumni and an internationally renowned technology entrepreneur. She really is among the best that this country has produced and among the best offerings that we have for the world, especially given the sector that she is in. What a wonderful way to kick off the show. It's 8 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to The Talking Point. I'm Kathy Mutlahlana, and as always, I'm with you until midday. I trust you had a lovely public holiday yesterday, especially if you had the opportunity of taking the day off, getting perhaps some time to rest. And of course, we still have lots to get through before we officially declare the week done and dusted. And in many ways, it's also still a countdown, right? We are officially in May. At the end of this month, you and I, my dear friend, will be going to the polls. We will be casting our vote. And so certainly a lot around elections and just the processes, the readiness will start to slowly dominate much of our programming. You can imagine there is always a lot to deal with and discuss come election time. And I think in about 16 days is when the first round of voting for those that are outside of the country will begin to take place. So slowly but surely, I think a lot of our programming is going to switch then to actually accommodate all that. Coming up on the show today, we'll kick it off with the open line as we always do. I'll be taking your calls on 086 000 2032. That's 086 000 2032. Remember, this is your national roundtable. You get to set the agenda and, of course, raise whatever matters of national interest you want to bring to our attention. On the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. So coming up on the show today, it is a Thursday. So the second hour will be getting into our Municipal Watch feature. And today we are focusing on the debt owed by government departments to municipalities. So the South African Local Government Association has raised alarm over this issue. The debt by government departments to municipalities is now sitting at, wait for it, 3 billion rand. 3 billion rand. That's how much municipalities are owed by government departments. So on the one end, of course, there's a question of walking the talk, right? You can't expect residents to be paying up their bills when in fact government itself is not following the line. The other is the risk that this creates for municipalities, the financial risk this creates for municipalities, many of which are having to, reach into their overdrafts and reach into borrowing in order to cover the significant shortfalls that are created through this debt. So we're going to be taking a look at this particular problem at 10 o'clock in the Municipal Watch feature. We'll have Salga join us for that conversation. And then for the final hour of the show, we're going to be taking a look at a report by PwC. And it's the PwC Economic Outlook Report, and it focuses specifically on foreign direct investment. And there's some good news for South Africa, especially when it comes to our economy. There are signs that foreign investors, by and large, have a positive outlook of the country. Often we talk about how the myriad of problems that the country is facing, not least of which relate to load shedding and the stability of the grid, are becoming a big turnoff for business. But this PwC report seems to suggest something otherwise, and we'll get then into the nitty-gritty of what are some of these markers that are contributing to this positive outlook for the country in the final hour of the show. So that's what you can expect on the talking point today. Of course, that will also then, as we always do, we'll wrap up the show with the book reading. So that's what you can expect coming up in the next 3 hours. So as we have been reflecting on the state of our country and also just where we are 30 years into this democracy, one of the statements I've heard being made more and more, and in fact, part of that was also echoed in a conversation I was part of earlier on in the week that also included political parties on a different platform, however, not on SAFM. And what the political party representatives all seem to suggest is that after the elections, we need some form of national gathering and national conversation. Some have said that this needs to be, a CODESA 2, and I use the term loosely because already we sort of had CODESA 1 and 2 between 1991 and 1993. So in realistic terms, in factual terms, it would probably have to be a CODESA 3. But that what we need is a CODESA 2, where we have a coming together of all of these stakeholders that represent different constituencies of our country, from civil society, business, politics, you name it, that this has to happen in order for us to reset, in order for us to reframe and reimagine what the next 30 years for South Africa could be. Because if we leave the job to just the politicians alone, then there are some risks that perhaps we leave ourselves exposed to. And the conversations then would be all-encompassing, right? You'd have, the need to address the socioeconomic problems that we're facing, electoral reform, the social issues, the state of the economy. I mean, I don't know what you would put on that list, but this idea of the need for a national conversation that helps us reshape and redesign our society, and come up with some kind of framework that we can all buy into. Do you support those calls? Do you think that is what we need? Is that what is going to take us out of the quagmire, the disappointment, the disillusionment that so many South Africans are dealing with? Interestingly, the former president, Thabo Mbeki, also spoke about the need for a national dialogue in an address he was making at Freedom Park. I'm going to play you that address, but I want to hear from you. Is there a need for us to come together as a country and have a conversation about where we are going in a way that, and I suppose it could follow the format of CODESA in terms of who was at the table, but not necessarily the form, because we also know that there was, a lot of compromises that were made in the decisions that people came to in CODESA, and ultimately, the falling apart of some of those negotiations, which left decisions largely in the hands of the NP and the ANC, the National Party that is, and the ANC. So there are those nuances, but I think the general idea, though, of society, the South African society coming together to come up with solutions that our country is facing, is that what we need to reshape the course and the trajectory of our country? I'd love to hear your views on it. I'll take your call shortly, 086 000 2032, on the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. And also, what form would this national conversation need to take in order for it to be effective, in order for it to perhaps not be another NDP? That's, the conversations for a national development plan. All right, so I'll take some of those questions shortly. Before I do, here's what the former president had to say.
I suggest that to respond to the enormous challenges created by the counter-revolution, our people should convene in a new and truly inclusive national dialogue to answer the question, what is to be done? Of course, that national dialogue would be held later this year after the general elections. In this regard, I must report that currently I am engaged in serious discussions with a number of our national foundations, because I'm certain that the country as a whole would benefit greatly from their collective voice on the matter of the national dialogue I've mentioned. I'm certain that during this coming month of May, it will be possible to present to the country as a whole a more detailed proposal concerning this proposed national dialogue. I was struck by the statements these Afrikaner compatriots made in the statement that we want to stay here and contribute to the well-being of the country and all its people, that we're building to remain here, and that the past should not destroy the future for us all. It seems to me that this statement, communicates a vitally important commitment I trust all of us share. We must contribute to the well-being of the country and all its people. It is exactly this spirit and the noble attitude which guarantee that working together, as President Ramaphosa said, that working together we will overcome.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Right, I'm going to kick it off in Mbombela this morning. Matlohonolo, good morning.